Call this meeting of the Salem Urban Renewal Agency to order for November 13th.
Board Member Kaiser. Present. Board Member Andersen is absent. Board Member Nanke. Here. Board Member McCoy. Here. Board Member Osick. Here. Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Cook. Here. Board Member Lewis. Here. And Chair Bennett.
Here. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilor McCoy? Any additions or deletions? None? Okay. We haven't even signed up. Nope. I don't have anyone signed up to address the Urban Renewal Agency. Okay, it's your last chance. Okay, we'll do public comment. I don't have anyone signed up for public. I do. I just did that, didn't I? Consent calendar.
Go that way.
Oh, I thought you were going to come to the center. Old Ford.
And pick up the ayes and nays.
You're welcome. Again.
He's going to tally it up, huh?
I didn't get my nap this afternoon. I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
With one no vote from Member Hoy on item 3.3B.
Okay. You want to run through it?
We have minutes of the October 8th Urban Renewal Agency meeting. Under action items, we have an agreement with we authorize the executive director to execute an agreement with John Safran, Argo Investment Corporation, Nancy Hasman, Diane Warshall, and Richard Gassmer for the acquisition of real property located on downtown. And 3.3B is authorize the executive director to execute an amendment to the attached grant agreement with PDQ Investments, LLC, extending the term of the grant to May 30th, 2019 to allow time to complete the construction of a 40-unit apartment building.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We have no further business. Urban Renewal Agency is adjourned. Call a meeting of the Salem City Council for November 13th to order. Please call a roll.
Councilor Kaiser. Present. Councilor Andersen's absent. Councilor Nanke.
Here.
Councilor McCoy.
Here.
Councilor Osick. Here. Councilor Hoy.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Councilor Lewis.
Here.
And Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Additions and deletions.
I move approval of additions to the agenda.
Second.
And that addition is item 3.3F, which is a ratification of the intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon Military Department Office of Emergency Management, and it has to do with sending fire units down to help assist California in fighting those deadly fires down there right now.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. No proclamations. Councilor comment. Any councilor comments? Well, I want to thank you all that attended the groundbreaking for the police facility last week. That was a really great event. Particularly pleased to have the chief and his folks there. We're really excited about this getting underway, Chief. We're going to get you a new home. We're going to get you a new home. The voters are going to get you that new home. We're just going to watch and hope it moves right along. Any other discussion? Had a chance at noon today to go to a luncheon going through the success, really, of the free clinic here in Salem that's over in Broadway Commons. Very impressive program. They're going to be adding a dental program. They already have they've hired a nurse practitioner who's there full-time, in addition to a tremendous amount of volunteer work that goes on that provides free medical care to residents without insurance that need medical care. It's a very impressive program. If any of you have a chance to kind of find out about it, or if you haven't had a chance to tour it, it's a really fantastic facility. Really a tremendous commitment from the community to that program. And I won't tell them about any of the other stuff I went to. You get tired of it. I'm just putting in an awful lot of hours doing this, okay? But we'll talk about that later, won't we?
We will.
Okay, we have a presentation. And the district attorney. We've just got the whole shebang tonight.
Sounds so official, doesn't it? A presentation. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Paige Clarkson, and I have the privilege of serving as the Marion County District Attorney. With me here today is Jan Calvin. Many of you probably know Jan. I'm going to have her wave there for just a second. Jan Calvin is a program coordinator for our Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion program, or LEAD. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on your agenda, which I know is packed, and so we're just going to take a couple of minutes of your time this evening just to update you on LEAD. I know many of you are probably familiar with the program or the idea of it, and the fact that we started it about almost 8 months ago. Now in Salem, as in coordination also with Marion County, but I wanted to take an opportunity and give you an update on it. As I know, issues that LEAD is trying to address are issues that you folks deal with every day with your constituents and here at the council. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update as to where we are and kind of what's exciting. As part of your materials today in your packet, you have some frequently asked questions or a fact sheet about LEAD. And so I'm not going to give you the 101 version of LEAD. I know many of you are very familiar with it, but LEAD, just very basically, in case you want a quick overview, is just a connection between law enforcement and those people that they frequently come into contact with, who are often committing what we would call livability offenses. So offenses like trespass, offenses like littering, or vagrancy of some type. And so often these are populations here in our community who are homeless, chronically, often addicted to various substances, and often suffer with mental illness issues or behavioral health concerns. And as you all know, law enforcement comes into contact with these folks quite frequently, and therefore these folks come across my desk and the desks of the DAs that work in my office quite frequently as well for these lower level offenses. And when we looked at this issue and the fact that we were using very expensive criminal justice resources for things that really are community health problems and community issues, we were looking for programs that might address those issues better, that might look at them from a different lens and might actually give us an ability to connect those people with resources rather than just with a jail bed. And we found the LEAD program, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, and we didn't make it up. We cheated off someone else's paper, namely that of Seattle, and this program has been working very well there for a number of years now, and it has also moved into other areas of our country, and we're one of a handful now that are running a program fairly successfully, and I just wanted to give you an update about that. Within those first 8 months, we now have 21 people who have been referred by law enforcement into the LEAD program. So these are individuals that law enforcement has come in contact with because of some sort of an offense or some sort of issue in the community that draws their attention to these folks. And again, they're often people that are known already to law enforcement. They're not strangers to especially our downtown officers. And I would note I have Chief Moore here and Lieutenant Upkees, who is directly in charge of the officers in this program. Salem PD has come alongside us in the DA's office, as well as the Sheriff's Department, and we're working out in the Lancaster area for that. But Salem PD has been an extreme support to us in getting this program off the ground. LEAD doesn't work without the law enforcement part of it. And these officers now have become very specially trained in this first 7 or 8 months of our program to specifically manage through these issues. And the chief has been very supportive, and we can't thank him enough and his folks for making this a priority. And I will tell you, it was Salem PD and the Sheriff's Office who first brought this program to my attention at the DA's office. This is a law enforcement-driven program that is really solving, again, a community problem. We now have 21 folks who have been referred to that. 17 are officially enrolled in our LEAD program. What this means is these individuals made a choice on the street, under the bridge, on the corner. Instead of going to jail that day for their minor offense, they instead decided to enter into a program that was going to connect them to services, whether that be treatment, whether that be housing, whether that might be counseling in some fashion, whether that might just be a mentor to help them get to a point where they might be willing to engage in treatment and get help. We do that through connecting them with a navigator. And in this first 7 months, we've hired our first navigator. His name is Josh. Josh is a former consumer of these kinds of services and is a real success story out of Marion County Parole and Probation, and has definitely found his calling now as he is on the other side of the law enforcement world. And he will actually respond to these officers when they call him. He'll respond right out there on that street corner and contact these individuals directly right at that moment and give them that option. So far, 17 of them have chosen that option with Josh, which means he carries a pretty heavy caseload right now of folks that he's keeping track of in the law enforcement assisted diversion program. We have 13 of those 17 who are actively engaged in some fashion. That doesn't always mean treatment for these folks. As many of you know, that can be a slow and long road and is not always attractive to individuals right off the bat. But Josh is actively engaged with 13 of these folks. Some of them tell us from the beginning they don't want to be involved, and that's certainly their prerogative. This program has to be successful with the consent and the voluntary involvement of those that we're trying to serve. But more than half of that 13 are currently enrolled in treatment. That's huge. That's a number of folks who otherwise would be sleeping on a street corner, otherwise would be not engaged in any sort of help for their addiction issues, and instead have chosen a road through this program that is trying to get them help, that is walking alongside them. And that means that's 14 people, 7 people out of that number who are hopefully not sleeping on the street tonight, who are hopefully making other healthy decisions. And that's because of a program that has connected them, has really used law enforcement as a bridge and not a barrier to them getting help and them succeeding. The other really exciting thing that you should know about LEAD is that we just obtained 2 separate grants from the Bureau of Justice Administration, so 2 separate BJA grants totaling over $1 million, about $1.3, $1.4 million. We're waiting to see how much, if we can actually obtain both of those at the same time. We might meet with some resistance on that. Nonetheless, we have a lot of money coming our way to continue the success and grow this program. Our hope is that not only will we be able to add additional navigators, which Marion County has already come alongside and agreed to add navigators as part of our health department budget, but with this grant, not only will we be able to add more navigators, so more contact that we can make in more communities and more pockets of your city, but also to add services. It doesn't help to have a navigator if we can't actually navigate these folks to something. So we're hoping to be able to add additional services, and of course housing continues to be one of our main issues and one of our main barriers to getting these folks healthy. But more treatment beds, more options for their success, more options through Marion County Mental Health for them to find success in that. So we're really excited over the next few months to be able to grow this program. And our goal today, coming here, I know Jan is here as a support and to answer any questions you might have that I can't. She also has some additional facts that were included in our most recent update to our LEAD partners. But I wanted you folks to know, as you're out there on the front lines and responding to your constituents and in our community, that that law enforcement is doing really great things in this community and making really great strides and really combining and collaborating in a unique fashion that is showing some actual success one by one by one. And if we can do that with the one, we can do it with many more. And so we're excited for an opportunity to do that, and we wanted to update you on all of that. And I'm happy to take questions, and so is Jan.
Well, thank you very much, Paige. Congratulations on this program, and congratulations to our police department and the sheriff's office for their work on this. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Paige, for coming down. I appreciate your leadership and the sheriff's leadership and the chief's leadership on this program. I don't have a question for you. I just wanted to compliment you on this. I had the opportunity several months ago to spend a couple of days with Seattle PD and the King County Sheriff's Office. So I've seen this program working firsthand, and it's an excellent, excellent program and exactly the direction we ought to be going with these types of offenses. So I just thank you very much for this and look forward to seeing it expand.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you,
Very
Mr.
much.
Mayor,
Good
and thank you,
news.
council members. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on then to public comment. I do want to make one comment. We won't be taking testimony on item 6B, which is the Kuebler Road development proposal, and I'll let the city attorney explain why.
That particular item is a land use decision. It's a quasi-judicial land use decision, so it may come before you for an appeal. That's your opportunity tonight to actually call that up. And so it's quasi-judicial. It's an ex-party issue, so that folks can't testify regarding the substance of this application to you outside of a hearing on the matter, and this isn't a hearing.
Okay. All righty. So public comment. Scott Snyder. And if you'll recall, you have 3 minutes. The orange light says you have 1 minute left. At the time the red light goes on, I would really ask you to stop speaking. I will interrupt you and stop you if you continue on. Okay, Scott, go for it.
Very good. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Scott Snyder. I'm the General Manager of the Grand Hotel downtown Salem, 201 Liberty Street, as well as the Chairperson for the Salem Area Lodging Association. I'm here speaking in both capacities. I'm here to go on the record in support of 2 propositions. Number 1, commercial air service would increase rooms sold by local hotels, thereby increasing our transient occupancy tax collections and retail sales by local businesses. And second, I urge the council to take any and all action requested by the organizers of this effort to make commercial air service in Salem a reality. Salem hotels experience a vacuum on a weekly basis. The Grand Hotel, every Thursday, we have 15 to 20 guest rooms that check out because they have early flights on Friday morning out of Portland. They stay in Portland the night before their flight. Although this can and does happen every single day, it's most noticeable on Thursdays. I can only presume that every facility in Salem has the same experience. How do I know that this happens? Well, my front desk is printing their boarding passes for them. It's Toby Olson, Regional Director for the Hampton Inn and Suites, has the same patterns at his facility at the Hampton Inn. He estimates that he has 50 to 60 guests per week check out because of early departures at PDX. He tries to influence as many of those guests as possible to his property that he has in Vancouver, Washington, also a Hampton Inn. So money leaving Salem, going to Vancouver, Washington. And he's estimating that that is between $8,500 and $9,000 a week in room revenue. This vacuum impacts much more than just hotel room revenue or TOT collections. Those guests may have eaten at a great restaurant in Salem. They may have had a chance to enjoy a performance at the Elsinore Theater or the Enlightened Theatrics. They might have shopped at one of our many downtown locally owned stores. Let's keep these guests here and keep their business travel and leisure dollars in Salem. The tourism industry urges your support for this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions? Thank you very much. Art Boberowitz. Art will be followed by Brett Harrison and then Tim Hay.
Thank you very much. My name is Art Boberowitz, and I am a volunteer with the committee to bring commercial air service back to Salem, Oregon. I am excited. I believe that Salem, Oregon is the hub of the Willamette Valley, and it's also the hub of a lot of capital thinking. And in this particular case, what is very important to me, I had the honor of earning my commercial pilot certificate at the Salem Airport, but I've also been a mentor at Atkinson Graduate School of Management at Willamette University for the last 18 years. I've had the opportunity of meeting many international students, and many of them I have been a mentor for them. Their parents come into the United States for their graduation. If we bring commercial air service back to Salem, many of them will come in San Francisco, and they're going to come into Seattle. That'll give them the opportunity to fly directly into Salem, Oregon. That is a first for many of them. And many of them are international business people who have businesses and would love to meet. I am sure they would love to meet people from the business community. The other part of it, too, is Oregon's wine country, and I'm going to call it Willamette Valley wine country. We have in this area, in our state, a national and international asset and an attraction for bringing people to Salem, Oregon, and the Willamette Valley. 3/4 of Oregon's wineries are right here in the Willamette Valley. I'd like to close with something that's very quick. And it's an experience that I had, that in many cases it's what we do when we learn something in life. Somebody else, like the neighbor, learns it before we do, and we won't really realize what's happening. In 1991, I had the opportunity to travel down to the Napa Valley in California and go on a wine tour. And the wine tour that was down there was very nice. It was local, but we got to see wineries that we only could see on television. And we had the opportunity to tour and to ask questions. And what was said to me in 1991, 27 years ago, that to me has an impact right now, is I was sitting across the table from a major winery owner in the Napa Valley, and I was talking to him. And I said, in your industry, you have all these wineries around you. You have down here in the valley, in the Napa Valley, you have all these wineries. What do you see as your biggest obstacle and possibly the biggest challenge you're going to be facing? In 1991, he bent down, looked at his glass of Pinot, looked up at me, and he said, the Willamette Valley in Oregon. I never forgot that. Ladies and gentlemen, the Willamette Valley in Oregon is on the target. It is on the screen. And commercial air service is going to be critical in bringing people who will come in and experience a world-class opportunity, meet world-class people, and it's really going to make, to me, the Willamette Valley a world-class location. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions? Brett Harrison, followed by Tim Hay.
Hello, councilors, mayor. My name is Brett Harrison. Whoops. Thank you. My name is Brett Harrison. I've been here now in Salem for 4 years. The big thing that I miss is being able to get in and out and not going a long distance. And with that, you've been hearing about the Air Service Committee. Both Scott and Art spoke eloquently. My words will be brief, but not my passion. This is a mid-Willamette Valley project. Salem, with 7 zip codes, certainly central, but in research, we looked at 59 zips, 1.1 million travelers each year, looking at $193 million worth of business in this area. But what struck me in looking at the project was its mid-Willamette Valley nature and the growth that we're going to see at least over this next decade and beyond. Certainly with art and the wine industry, but the organic growth we're going to find here. What I want to share with you tonight and with councilors is a group of letters of support that encompass the valley as we know it, and the valley as it is going to grow in this next decade and beyond. Therefore, for me, it is an advocacy, it is a passion to see service return, see it sustainable, and really when one looks at it, something that is economically viable, something that is socially responsible, and at the same time environmentally friendly when we look at taking people off the road who are driving to PDX, driving to Eugene, or here where 90% of the area that we reviewed is within a half an hour of Salem. It is a pity to see them on the road and to see really an opportunity that is lost. Thank you, and if I may.
Thank you, Brett. Any questions for Brett? Okay. Tim Hay, Spencer Card, then Nick Williams. Feel free to line up.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. It has been many years since I've been here. As you know, I was on the Airport Commission for the first part of the decade, from 2000 to 2012, and I was actually one of the ones that helped bring Delta Airlines back here in the 2007, 2008. Scott had mentioned something earlier that I'm going to touch on. He talked about people checking out the night before and spending the night in Portland on Friday before their flight's out. I can tell you, I fly about 95 to 100,000 miles a year in my new job, and I am one of those. But more importantly, I also do this. I support the state of Oregon and some programs that they do for the organization I work for. We actually choose to have our meetings in Portland rather than Salem, costing the city of Salem businesses about $60,000 to $70,000 a year because there is no way of getting people from Portland down to Salem in an effective manner. That's just me and one person. I imagine a lot of other companies do that as well. So there is lost revenue coming or leaving Salem because companies are choosing to have meetings up in Portland. Just talk about numbers. I'm kind of a numbers guy here. We are the largest state capital in the United States with no commercial air service by far. There's 10 capitals out there that have no air service. We are the largest population-wise. We're also the third largest without any air service in close proximity to other airports. We are the second largest city in Salem. We're projected to have, or second largest city in Oregon. We're projected to have another 100,000 people here in the next decade or so. This area is growing. PDX is growing. 20 million passengers are going to go through PDX this year. Eugene hit over 1 million passengers last year, and they continue to grow. There is no reason why Salem cannot support service here. There are the numbers here. All we need is 1% of the people that are going through Portland or Eugene to sustain air service here. 1% isn't that many, and there are plenty of business people in this town that would gladly pay an extra $50, even $100 per ticket, to be able to save that time to fly out of Salem rather than go into Portland. For me, my rule of thumb now is I leave 3 to 3.5 hours before my flight. That's a lot of productivity lost during the day, spending the time navigating I-5 and 205. And that's going and coming. Just yesterday, Saturday or Sunday, I was flying home from Phoenix, and I got stuck in a traffic jam on 205 on a Sunday afternoon. It happens, and it's happening more and more. We see what's going on in Portland. We see the traffic on I-5, and we see the traffic on 205, and how they're talking about doing tolling. Well, that's an impact on what happens here, too. Salem, if we were out in the middle of nowhere, we'd have service like we were in Boise. But we're in that Portland shadow, and it's time that we get out of Portland's shadow and become our own again and put Salem, Oregon back on the map when it comes to commercial service. Thank you for your time, and I do have some handouts that I'll get to the recorder to pass out. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Spencer Card, followed by Nick Williams, and Eric Anderson will be after Nick.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Spencer Carroll. I'm a local attorney. I worked for Marion County Emergency Management for over a year. I was the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator for Columbia County. I regularly attend the City of Salem Emergency Management Advisory Council with Greg Walsh. I am the Secretary of the Salem Airport Disaster Preparedness Group and an active participant in the Oregon Emergency Management Association, and I live in Ward 1. I'm here tonight to ask you to please give your consent to the Salem Chamber of Commerce to be the applicant on the ROAR grant. I will illustrate how important the Salem Airport is to the region's and state's resiliency and how bringing commercial air service will improve the airport's resiliency. Starting at the federal level, Salem Airport is designated as a Tier 1 airport by FEMA, with Redmond Airport currently designated as FEMA's base of operations. Tier 1 airport in federal language means Type 1 federal staging area that will function as an aerial port of embarkation and departure for response and recovery operations. As many of you probably know, PDX is expected to succumb to liquefaction following a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, according to the Oregon chapter of the American Society of Civil Engineers. As you also probably know, the Salem Airport recently underwent improvements in resurfacing, restriping, and regrooving of the runways with large support from federal dollars. However, some federal dollars are contingent upon emplanements and airport operations. Grants such as the Airport Improvement Program through the FAA is contingent upon airport emplanements and operations. Currently, Salem is considered a non-primary airport and as such is limited to $150,000 from that federal grant program. If we can increase our employments to over 10,000 per year, that eligibility will increase to $1 million. Therefore, by bringing commercial air service to Salem Airport, we will increase our employments and therefore increase our eligibility for federal funds, which will in turn increase the airport's resiliency and therefore improve the resiliency of the city, region, and state overall. Now to the state level. In a document entitled Resiliency 2025, authored by Governor Brown and Mike Harriman, 6 key strategies were introduced. Strategy 5 is to strengthen local emergency management organizations and develop more robust logistical staging bases. Governor Brown has directed OEM to develop a grant program by 2021 that provides funding to logistical staging bases. Additionally, House Bill 2687 directs OEM to develop and administer grant program to distribute emergency preparedness equipment to local governments and other recipients. My point is, by sharing these grants, is to illustrate state funds will be channeled to airport resiliency, and while employments may not be an enumerated criterion of these grants, it stands to reason that having commercial airline service would only increase the importance and urgency of improving the City of Salem's airport with non-city funds. Please give your consent to the Salem Chamber of Commerce to be the applicant on the ROAR grant.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
have some handouts.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Sorry for misreading your name.
Not all, Mayor Bennett.
Did
Thank you.
anyone have any questions? Right, thank you very much. Nick Williams, followed by Eric Andersen, and then Richard Jenkins.
I don't know how Spencer fit 6 minutes into 3, but he did it. Good job. God gracious. Mayor, City Councilors, my name is Nick Williams. It's my honor to serve as CEO for the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce. My testimony this evening is quite simple. One of our 1,250 local member businesses that I've talked to about this issue, I've yet to come across one that's against it. It's well received within our community that this is a good thing to do for business, but just overall livability within our community. Following that, you'll see that we are hopeful to be the stewards of this particular agenda item, the ROAR grant, and we are well equipped to be excellent stewards of those dollars to effectively and efficiently move this process forward. That's all I have this evening. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Williams? Thanks, Nick. Eric Andersen, followed by Richard Jenkins, followed by Jeff James.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett and members of the council. I'm Eric Andersen. I'm the new president of SEDCOR.
Right.
And I know you'll be looking at the city's economic development quarterly report later on in the agenda, and we decided that it might be a good opportunity for me to at least come in during this session and introduce myself, get a face to go with the name, let you know I'm very much looking forward to working with the city staff and elected officials on economic development activities and issues that are affecting us. I know we've had a long history with the City of Salem and a lot of support, so I thank you for that. I'm in the process of moving back to the area. I've been in Tacoma, Washington for the last couple of years. Was spent the early part of this century, which always sounds so odd, as the Economic Revitalization Team Coordinator for Governor Kulongoski and lived in this region. Looking forward to coming back. I've got family here. Had a very nice level of welcome from some old friends and colleagues as well, so it does really feel like home. So I'm looking forward to a lot of new faces as well. So looking forward to being part of your team as you look to continue development around the successful development around Salem.
Well, we're really glad you're here. We're looking forward to working with you as well. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Andersen? I'm sure we will as time passes.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you
Great. Thank you very
much.
much.
Richard Jenkins, followed by Jeff James.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Jenkins. I live at 424 Lone Brook Court, Southeast. I've been a resident here since '76. There was regular airline service then. I'm calling you asking you to use your vision and imagination to imagine where we're going to be 20 years from now. You have done that already. You've got a new police station under construction. You're looking at a third bridge across the Willamette. I'm asking you to look at a revitalized airport here. We don't know where we're going to be in 20 years. We may have a new guy like SpaceX come up with a new transportation system. or a more efficient one that'll make this airport much more viable than it is. We're tied up with roads, traffic, security, and everything else at the Portland airport. I hate to go there. Okay. I asked your support with this proposal. It's going to cost nothing. We'll get it in grants. But it will help this community. It will help all the travelers that travel. Help the community, help us, and help the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeff James, followed by Laura Buell.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Different topic. Agenda item 5A, stipends for the Mayor and City Council. I'm Ward 3, and 44 years ago, in November '74, I testified for the first time to the City Council. There was a famous publisher, Dewey Rand, sitting here at Ward 3, I think it was. The mayor was Robert Lindsay, famous dentist, and Philbert Farmer. And there was a gentleman over where Matt is sitting called Peter Courtney, assistant to the president of Western Oregon State College. And there was a distinguished lady, Ellen Lowe, where in Ward 6, I believe. So that was 44 years ago, and I built up a great respect for all of the city councilors and mayor for all their dedication. But it occurred to me that they all needed to be either independently wealthy, or their firms or businesses need to give them time off to attend. About 34 years ago, I came down here and observed that there was a pharmacist on this side of the council that was having difficulty. His business wouldn't give him time off to attend council, and so they were docking his salary, and he was losing something like $6,000 a year in income. So I thought that is probably affecting many people who have jobs on this, regular jobs, and then try to serve the city council. And then 20-something years ago, there was a, I think that was about 20 years ago, but 30 years ago, there was a assistant to the president of Chemeketa, who the Chemeketa refused to give him time off to serve the council, and he had to make up his time. That he could attend a city council meeting, but he had to make up the time. So I think we need a stipend, and I don't know what department heads make here. It's probably $50 an hour. I think we're talking about $1 an hour, and I think you guys deserve it, because I see you down at breakfast meeting. It's a 7 o'clock meeting with your constituents. I see you at neighborhood meetings in the evenings up till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So $1 an hour, 40-hour week would be a good compensation. So
Thank you. Thank you.
I recommend
Any
stipend.
questions for Mr. James? Yeah, Councilor Lewis.
How are we going to pay for it?
No, I just want to thank you for your decades of service to the city and your continued support as a volunteer. It's my assumption that throughout those decades, your volunteerism, you have not been paid anything.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And but I think we just want to make sure that people who have regular jobs consider running for council, and they need some economic help. Just a modest $1 an hour help. Thanks.
Okay, Laura Buell, followed by Bob Hidley.
Good evening. My name is Laura Buell. I live at 695 16th Street Northeast. I'm here to express support for the Riverfront Park Master Plan, which is item 3.3C on the agenda, and to suggest a change that will make the plan and the city of Salem more sustainable and more climate friendly. The report on global warming issued last month by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said that in order to avoid global catastrophe, there must be, quote, rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society, unquote. While the development of a climate action plan for the city of Salem is crucial, we cannot wait for that in order to act. The IPCC report reminded us that we need to make very drastic cuts in greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, as aggressively as possible. It is a call to action, and we must act right away. There are things we can do to change this scenario, but we don't have a lot of time. Transportation is Oregon's largest in-state contributor to GHG emissions, 40%. And transportation emissions have risen during each of the past 3 years. So if we want to lower greenhouse gas emissions in the state, the fastest way to do that is by reducing transportation emissions, which are caused both by driving and the infrastructure itself, meaning construction and concrete and asphalt production. It has been shown in peer-reviewed research that free and abundant parking leads to more driving. Because of this, I would ask for one small but important change to the Riverfront Master Plan. Do not include an expanded parking area. There is already a lot of parking at the park, and there's plenty more right next to the park downtown. Instead of expanding the parking lot, encourage people to get to the park in other ways, or use parking that has already been built nearby. Doing this will help Salem lower its GHG emissions. Side benefits of this would also be less urban heat island effect and potential aesthetic benefit. I suggest that instead of building parking, the city plant a grove of trees in the same area and use it to educate citizens about climate change. There could be an educational display that shows how GHGs were reduced by planting trees instead of building parking, and encourage citizens to replicate the effort. Since Mayor Bennett has joined the Climate Mayors, an organization whose members commit to demonstrating leadership, quote, leadership on climate change through meaningful actions in their communities, unquote, I trust that the mayor and the council will seriously consider my suggestion to improve our city, state, and world. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions? Okay, Bob Hidley, followed by Doug Brenizer.
Hi, I'm Bob Hidley. I'm chair of the Salem Airport Advisory Commission. And I think you all in your packet have a letter that we sent on behalf of the commission. We review the issue of recruiting airlines into Salem. We've had a presentation. We put a lot of work into looking into it, and then we passed a motion unanimously to ask the city council to work on the efforts to hopefully get an airline here. And the start of that is getting a grant to start the marketing efforts. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Doug Brenizer? Brenizer, I'm sorry.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm also with the Airport Advisory Commission, and just wanted to say I'm here in support, obviously, of the effort to begin this kind of first step in recruiting an airline service to Salem again. I spent 25 years in sales and marketing for a company in Albany, and we have had international customers on a very regular basis, and over 75% of them spent their time in the hotels in Portland, so they could make flights in and out that were convenient for their schedules. And we, over the years, made the limo companies in Albany rich. We think that's revenue that could come to the city here, and we think that's one of the reasons I support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Tony Kramer. Followed by Darrell Knox, followed by Ron Sturba.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. I'm a bit nervous. I'm just representing myself. I'm here to speak about the Riverfront Master Plan. I am in favor of the master plan. I've been to a few of these. I know this is, or at least I think this is the first time it's coming before all of you. And the reason I'm here tonight is just to put a face to the considerations of the handicapped community. I would like, when you look at further plans and talk about it, that you look beyond the ADA requirements. Those are really awesome requirements, but often I feel like they don't take into consideration, excuse me, us as human beings, as people who want to be with our families, who want to enjoy things, and who don't want to be segregated and put apart. The item I'm most concerned about is the amphitheater. And the reason I'm concerned is because it right now is slated to be simply a grassy slope. If it's a grassy slope, it will be very difficult for me to use. I can't get up and down off the ground. If I get on the ground, I'm kind of like a turtle. I can't get back up unless I have people help me. And I would like to tell you that the terracing on the current amphitheater and the situation in Kaiser Rapids works amazingly. It works for myself. It works for the community, like older citizens who have knee and hip issues. It works for my friends in wheelchairs because it's a flat surface that they can wheel over. And it makes it so that we can be there with our friends and family. The ADA requirements just make it so that it's accessible. If there's like a little pad that has seating on it, which means that if I want to sit in a chair, because I cannot also get in those little chairs that we're supposed to have on places like that, I'm sitting in a chair that is roped off, or I'm sitting there going, hey, look at me, look at my disability, or I'm sitting down there and my family or my friends are in a different spot. So I would just kind of like you to consider that, consider if there's any way to get terracing. I know the guys over there have heard me and are listening to me, and I just wanted to kind of make that point so that you'll look at that. Bush Park doesn't work very well for me when we do things there.
Great. Yes.
Thanks. Tony?
Yes.
Thank you for your testimony. Are you talking about the current amphitheater or the proposed amphitheater?
I'm talking and speaking that the current amphitheater there that has the terracing with the grass and the curbs works awesomely. I can sit on the side. My friends with knee issues can sit on the side with, it's like a little chair, and be able to go there to be with our friends and not have the accessibility problems. I can take my friends with the wheelchair. It's grass, so we kind of have to push hard, but we can have them with us there also on the ends. They don't have to sit down in the front or where there's a pad.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you for coming down today, Tony, and sharing with us your experience. I'm really interested in making sure that we can have a further discussion about this, because I think you bring an important point, not just to include other people, but the way that we include everyone and make them available, make services available really defines how we view things as a city. So I just wanted to thank you.
I appreciate that.
I have a question for Mr. Fernandez. Given Tony's testimony and the success, is there a way to accommodate this? Given the plan, can we, as we go into the more specific design stages, begin dealing with the issue she's describing?
Certainly.
Okay.
That's she makes an excellent point, and we want to make sure that those that the ADA issues are addressed appropriately, and they're appropriately addressed as part of the actual creation of the design documents for the amphitheater.
So I want to make sure that I hear your answer is yes, and we will have an opportunity, and Ms. Kramer will have an opportunity to work with you and your staff as we go into a design phase. This merely is to set out that area as amphitheater, but not to offer a specific design. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct. Her point is well taken. It is laid out in the master plan as a grassy field. But again, it's a master plan that is not a design, and so when we actually go into design, we can address those issues and make sure that people with disabilities aren't shunted off to a corner or just placed, but actually there's more room and more space for that kind of.
And Ms. Kramer, have you You registered this during the master planning process?
I've been to the meetings, I've spoke at the meetings,
Okay.
went to the last one was the Parks and Rec one,
Okay.
so I am on record with this.
Great. You all know how to reach her then when the time comes to, Patricia's saying yes.
I will make sure that Patricia Farrell.
She says yes,
has
I
her
can
name
see
and
her.
number.
Okay, good. Well, we will be watching. We're very interested in Ms. Kramer's concerns. Thank you. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One last question. Speaking of the parking extensions in the riverfront plan and just access not only within the park but to the park, do you have any insight into access to Riverfront Park and how that would be affected based on the new master plan and the developments, or what could be done to make it more accessible? Anything we're missing on that aspect on getting to the park?
I think that the parking is an issue. I agree with the person about the emissions and things. I also know that is it important to have the handicap areas so that we can be facilitated. I know that often what happens with me is I have friends drop me off. And so one consideration that I think would be lovely is to, in the parking lots, make sure there are enough benches so that when we're dropped off, we can sit there and wait for the rest of our party to get there. And that's something that isn't often. We're like, I'll be over at that bench over there, or something like that, or come find me, get the phones out, which is very convenient. But that's one thing I can think of right off the bat, is to have accessibility from the parking lot, kind of like a little staging area for the people that are being dropped off or waiting to be picked up, and those kind of things.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I hope you'll stay in touch with us on this as it develops.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Darrell Knox, then Ron Sturba.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, City Council. My name is Darrell Knox. I'm a resident of Ward 4. I'm a CPA and a partner with Aldrich CPAs, and I have a pleasure of serving on SEDCOR's Executive Council. I'll try to be brief here because there's been a lot of other speakers in support of commercial air service, but I'm here to represent SEDCOR and to voice our support for the efforts to bring that service back to Salem, Agenda Item 3.3E. SEDCOR's mission is to support business success by retaining and attracting high-quality jobs, in part by coordinating public and private partnerships. We believe a healthy business community investing in our region and providing high-quality jobs is an essential element to creating a vibrant, healthy community for our citizens. And the effort to bring commercial air service back to Salem is just another opportunity for all of us to work together to enhance the economic vitality of Salem and the surrounding region, as they've spoken to the whole Willamette Valley. We believe commercial air service will help retain and grow local business. It will help to attract new businesses to the region, and will offer a welcome alternative to flying out of Portland or Eugene for local residents. This grant request before you is the next step in bringing service back to Salem. And it's just a step, but it's the next good step. So I appreciate the opportunity to affirm SEDCOR's support for commercial air service in Salem, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Sturba, gosh, I'm going to have to guess what you're here about.
It was getting a little warm under the lid here. Good evening, Mayor Bennett and council members and city staff and citizens of Salem. I'm a active pilot of 46 years, 40 here in the city of Salem, and a hangar owner. I have watched the airport grow in popularity and I'm very proud to see the Salem Airport be a destination for the business community. I built the plane I fly. It has 2 computer navigator screens, a GPS, autopilot, weather radar images, and the ability to see other aircraft in the vicinity of my track. Why do I say this about the state-of-art instrumentation? I'm using Salem Airport as a comparison in the unique new landing qualities now completed at Salem Airport by the airport administration. I have a deep desire to see airline service return to Salem Airport. Let's eliminate the cars on I-5 and Interstate 5 going to PDX. It's time it's really time. It's time to move forward with this. Let's do our part in keeping good air quality and curb the conditions that cause climate change. We need more efficient travel. I'm asking that you stand and support the efforts to bring back airline service to Salem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sturba. Appreciate you being here. Kara Campuzano, followed by Brent DeHart.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett and council members. I am Kara Campuzano, and I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at the Salem Convention Center. I'm here to go on record on behalf of the Salem Convention Center to show my support on the efforts of bringing scheduled commercial air service and commercial charter service to the Salem Airport. On average, the Salem Convention Center has hosted 4 to 6 college football teams. This year, that has not been the case. We've had 0 football teams. And it's because of the package deals that they're being offered in Eugene between the flight services and the cost of charter bus services. They take about 4 to 6 charter buses, depending on who's all coming, including their boosters. We know there is potential in reaching more convention groups that are staying with our competitors in Portland and Eugene because of the airport. We used to have the ability to sell to our clients. The airport's 57 miles away. That's just a quick hour. Now that 57 miles is about a 2-hour drive, give or take, depending on traffic for that day. An increase in out-of-state travelers and conventions due to having scheduled commercial air service in Salem, of course, significantly increases the revenue for groups at the Salem Convention Center. It doesn't just stop there, though. An increase in attendees, larger conferences, and longer stays increase in hotel revenue throughout the city, which in turn increases our TOT, tourism occupancy tax dollars. These clients, as they already are, will be spending more time in our restaurants and shopping centers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Brent DeHart, followed by Britta Franz.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, I want to start by thanking you for your service and also for the opportunity to speak. My name is Brent DeHart. I do business at 465 Commercial Northeast, and I own Salem Aviation Fueling. So I need to put on the record, I have a profit motive. So of all the people before you today, I'm the one that actually has a profit motive because I stand to gain financially if we have commercial service. I was part of the recruitment effort 10, 12 years ago, and my crew fueled those jets that SkyWest flew in and out of Salem. That being said, I don't know if there's anybody alive that hates the 205 more than I do. I hate the 205, and so I hate flying to Portland. And for quality of life, for my kids, for my community, I'm here to advocate for commercial air service. My piece tonight is to talk about infrastructure, answer any questions about that. We know the field obviously intimately. The runway, a lot of people don't realize our runway is longer than the runway at Orange County John Wayne, in case anyone has ever flown in to go to Disneyland. And that certainly has capacity for a lot of airline service in Orange County. We have, of course, the control tower. We have a fire truck that is specific to aviation that the city tests every single week and keep in compliance with FAA regulations. My fueling operation keeps up our infrastructure to specifications. So we're inspected, that we have quality control, and fuel filtering and all that is up to speed. We have the terminal, we have the luggage, we have the counters. In short, we don't have any infrastructure needs to upgrade. So we're not going to come back later and say, well, we need this for a remodel, or we need this for or that. We're looking ahead. The one piece of equipment we need is for TSA to come back with that little screening booth that we get to walk through. Other than that, the infrastructure at this McNary Field is ready to go. And that's important for everyone to realize moving forward. And that's one of the reasons why we think we can go get this. And we have an advantage from other cities because we're competing for these grants across the nation. A couple topics, since I get to be last. We did do this study, and Mr. Hay passed out the statistics. But I wanted to point out, we're really only looking at trying to capture 10% of the people who are already flying. And the data that was collected and paid for by the community group is real tickets and real data purchased. It's not projections by a consultant. Important to realize. And Mr. Harrison didn't have time to add, and for the public who is listening and present, that all those letters that you received, for letters of support, they're all over the county. And the only reason we don't have more letters is we only have so much time in the day. But they include Western Oregon, Corbin, Polk County, Marion County, Independence, Silverton, Kaiser, all of these the cities, supporting and wanting in the broad region another air transportation option than PDX. The excitement is broad, the enthusiasm is broad, and we really, really appreciate your support in our efforts, and here to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Mr. DeHart? Oh, yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Britta Franz, followed by Michael Johnson.
Good evening, all of you. I'm a familiar face maybe, but I've lived here for more than 50 years. And good evening, council and all you volunteers. 50 years ago, I participated with dozens of Salem citizens in the completion of this city hall and added a wide variety of art. The only one that's up today is that one, which is all we need. The following years, from the very, very, very beginning, in the design of Riverfront Park as it is today, I became involved as a volunteer for many, many, many years. It took a long time. It was all, the original park was all financed with private individual people, children, mothers, dogs, to finance. The Riverfront Park's new plan, I wish to go on record with some very well-considered comments. I believe that you will agree that the plan seriously needs to be revised, or I hope you will believe that, when it's ready to be implemented. Please accept my heartfelt words. There are several areas that I believe are important that are not fully resolved. The proposed clever sidewalk, floating sidewalk, needs some serious consideration in light of Oregon's very sophisticated fish protection rules, which I believe have to be very, very cautiously and carefully planned for financially. The anticipated high water speed variation when the adjacent mandated creek work is completed will change the water speed at the sidewalks that are on the water. The high-risk insurance costs need to be anticipated. Most communities prefer river edge sidewalks along the edge just above the water line. The north parking lot needs some more consideration. It is not on the sketches. The future demands that we maximize, expand additional parking, anticipating population demands, unfortunately or fortunately, because we won't be able to manage to use the existing space for the population that's coming. So we have to tighten up and anticipate the future. And I would anticipate we will have to plan either above or below level, low-level parking, which is what's done in parks. Low-level, narrower parking, not big facilities. My personal urgent biggest concern is the immediate need for a north rest room.
Great, thank you, Britta.
Okay, I have one thing. I would lastly like to urge that we recognize one opportunity, and that is Hazel's Carousel. Instead of putting a spot in front, I would like you to consider thinking about the future and making it a 3-story building so that the horses can be in the middle and the people can be on top. We'll have a big sign that says Hazel's Carousel, which she well deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Britta, very much. I'm really interested, Peter, in the floating sidewalk, understanding how that I see it is it an absolute project, or what goes on with something like
Well,
that?
all the items in the master plan are just that. Items
they
in the master plan, they're aspirational.
Okay.
Everything needs to be designed, need to be permitted. And, with the issue related to the changes that will certainly be coming when we remove the slab from Pringle Creek, that's coming next year, that will be done next year, and then we'll have many years of experience with what the new circumstance of the water flow is at that location.
So the concern that Britta outlines in terms of flow and things will be part of the consideration, final consideration.
Absolutely.
Design
Absolutely.
plans, that's good. Talk a little about going underground at the parking in the north end.
Yeah, that cannot be done. That is Riverfront Park is over a hazardous waste field. There's pictures at the Urban Development Department that shows what that area was before we turned it into Riverfront Park. So there's a 2-foot cap that is over all of that. A lot of the efforts that are done on the south 4 acres, everything is intended to be above and not digging below. So nothing is impossible, but the expense would be extreme, not just from the engineering and construction side, but from removal of all of that hazardous soil.
Okay.
So that's really not feasible.
Okay, and then the final is, when you look at the plan, the restroom, I think what I'm understanding Britt is saying is, the restrooms appear to be fairly small on the north end. That again is a design issue, that's not the final drawing.
Right. We did our cost estimates based on 8 additional bathroom stalls. So they're similar. What's laid out in the master plan is similar to what we have today. So there'll be 4 at the south end and 4 at the north end. I've heard Councilor Andersen and others speak to the need, especially for the north side bathrooms. When we go to fund and design that, if there's a desire to do more on the north end, that is actually easily designed and addressed at the time of design and construction.
When you do that, would you take a look to it self-cleaning?
As a matter of fact, we are. Yes.
Yeah, excellent. So that is part of the consideration.
Yes.
I think the city family, all of us are ready to finance that immediately.
Yeah. For years, we've been ready for that one, Sally.
We're way late. It's on the original plans from 1990.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sally.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Britta, for coming down. Peter, this kind of is a question for you, including the testimony we heard from Laura earlier, and then to speak to Britta with the parking needs. In the master plan, can you kind of explain the relationship with transit and the space being carved out for transit outside of parking in the park for different alternatives for people to be able to use the park, to be able to accommodate that if transit were willing? I know because they're separate agencies outside of the city, being able to comment on that in any way to provide options for people.
Sure. Well, I mean, in terms of transit, there's certainly room for any kind of vehicle to maneuver in
I mean, like public transit.
Yeah,
Let me clarify.
in the parking lot to the north and south. So if they chose to serve the area, they certainly could, and the buses would fit in there. Parking is always a struggle. You know, how much land do you eat up? How much parkland do you eat up to address the need? We looked at that very carefully. What we laid out is an opportunity on the south end and the extra 4 acres to really, for a very small space, a very small amount of space, we're able to add 100 parking spaces, just the way it lays out. And then after that, as Ms. Buell spoke about earlier, then there's lots of extra parking in downtown. We're looking to acquire the SLU property, and if we can work with the railroad, we're looking to add access to the park at the south end so that the garage at City Hall, windows to the west, the on-street parking on Commercial Street would be more easily accessible into the park. So those are the other options that we're working on, but we feel we've come to a good compromise in adding the 100 spaces on the south and then leaving the north as it is.
And there's
Okay,
been
thank you
no...
thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Go
just
ahead.
one more follow-up, Mr. Mayor, I promise. So there's been no active conversation then with transit, with Chariots, to say that we would like to be able to have the park included in any kind of
Not a-
downtown loop or anything like that?
I'm sorry, not as part of the master planning process.
All right, thank you.
Great.
I
Thank you,
understood there
Mary.
were
No,
60
Greta,
spots
Greta,
and not
Greta.
100.
Greta, time's up.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very
You
much.
bet. Thank you.
Listening and your discussion,
Michael
and
Johnson.
your interest, all of you.
It is so nice to be here again. The last time I was here, I want everybody to know how accommodating the city has been. The last time I was here, I represent the East Salem Suburban Neighborhood Association out in East Salem. We're east of I-5. If you look on the back part of your agenda items, we're the white blob down here that has no number on it. The last time I was here, I sat for almost 3.5 hours, and Commissioner Nanke graciously extended the meeting so I could have a time to talk, even if it was only for 3 minutes. I am here. We are grateful for the help we received from the city. Recently, within the last year, one of our neighbors asked for traffic signals, turn signals at the intersection of Rickey and Connecticut, which is Houck Middle School, and the city did it within 3 weeks. Oh, and the neighbors out there are just grinning every time they get the turn signal. We are notified from Salem City Development whenever there's a hearing to be held on all kinds of property issues, save for one, and that's why I'm here tonight. Under SRC 210, neighborhood associations are notified of preliminary discussions, but not neighborhoods that are outside the city.
That's correct.
I'm here to ask you to please wave your hand or wave a gavel or wave whatever you need to do, that for the planned unit development at the intersection of State and Cordon, 117 acres, that for all discussions from now going forward, that ESNA, the East Salem Suburban Neighborhood Association, is notified as things happen and not a month and a half after. There's a lot going to be happening out there. It's 117 acres. It's flat land. The water table is about where your ankles are. And if everything gets built, there's going to be 950 residences, 9,500 traffic or vehicle in and outs every day, and the only accesses are going to be on State and Auburn. It's going to create a horrendous excitement among the neighbors that we would like to be a part of the conversation before the conversation ever gets finished.
Great, thank you very much.
SRC 210.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Nanke.
And Norma's writing right now?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, the consent calendar. That's the last person I have signed up. Does anyone else want to get up and speak? Good, okay. Consent calendar.
I move the approval of the consent calendar.
Second by Nanke.
Consent calendar consists of the city council minutes from the October 22nd meeting, the work session minutes for the city council work session on November 5th. Under resolutions, 32A, the recommendation, if we pass it, we will adopt resolution 2018-82, approving an application by M Parkside Living LLC for tax exemption under city's multiple unit housing tax incentive program. And we also, under this, will request boards of other taxing districts to adopt a resolution consenting to a tax exemption for the project, exempting the project's full property tax liability. Under action items, we authorize the city manager under 33A to execute an agreement with Zagster Inc. to place bike sharing stations on city property and waive fees for the term of the agreement. Under 33B, we are authorizing the city manager to execute a ground lease with Ponderosa Financial Services that extends an existing lease for a hangar that they own. 33C, we adopt the 2018 Riverfront Park Master Plan. 33D is the City Council adopts the order amending the decision to approve the subdivision and urban growth preliminary declaration permit with conditions as contained in attachment 1. And with that one, Councilors Hoy and Kaiser want to register a no vote. And 33E authorizes the city manager to consent to the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce's application for rural Oregon airport relief grant funds to be used for commercial air service development at the Salem Municipal Airport.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. We'll move on. I think we'll take a brief break to get Councilor Andersen on the phone.
Mr. Mayor, just a clarification. There was an addition, 33F was a ratification of the IGA with the...
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
He just didn't mention it, but we voted on it. It's
Right.
pretty much over. Okay, very good. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute on 18-510.
The City Council will now conduct a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony regarding proposed solid waste collection rates and charges. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by other interested persons. Individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 1 minute remains, and a red light will appear when your time is expired. Please conclude your testimony when the red light appears.
Great. We have a presentation from Mr. Zink.
Yes. Good evening. Can everyone hear me all right? I'll take that as a yes. All right. So good evening, Mayor and members of council. Again, my name is Ryan Zink. I'm the franchise administrator for the City of Salem. I just want to thank you for this opportunity to present this proposal regarding solid waste rates. The recommendation before you this evening is to approve the proposed solid waste management service rates effective January 1, 2019, as they are found in resolution in your packet, and the full list of proposed rates is in Exhibit B, or excuse me, Exhibit A. So Salem Revised Code establishes the criteria used in making a decision of whether proposed rates are just, reasonable, and adequate. The primary objective of the review process is to establish rates that balance the cost of service to the customer while allowing the city's 6 franchise haulers a sufficient operating margin to maintain operations in the city. Return on revenue, which is a pre-tax margin of profit, is used to determine if this balance is being met. Factors including current and projected revenues, expenses, and equipment costs are used to calculate a sufficient and reasonable operating margin. Many jurisdictions that franchise their solid waste operations use return on revenue as an instrument for adjusting rates. As an example, both Beaverton and Gresham have both codified a targeted return on revenue for their solid waste providers. Historically, the City of Salem has set rates to target a pre-tax return of 10%, which is consistent with other jurisdictions. You may recall that roughly 13 months ago, not minutes ago, months ago, I was standing here before you with a similar presentation. The plan at that time was to start a biennial rate setting process that would occur on alternate years from the water, wastewater, and stormwater rate setting process. Nominal increases were adopted for both 2018 and 2019 that reflected known inflationary increases. However, the option was left open also to adjust rates if unforeseen events necessitated an adjustment, such as significant market changes. Also at that time, offsetting revenue from the sale of recycled materials remained low and uncertain. But the extent to which the recycling market would change in the next few months was also unknown. In May of 2018, Mid-Valley Garbage and Recycling Association, who represents Salem's 6 franchised haulers, approached the city with a proposal to adjust the 2019 rates. Mid-Valley cited China's decision to stop accepting certain recycled materials as the primary reason for the request. Disposal fees in Polk County, as well as diesel fuel, are also notable factors. Following this request, the city engaged Chris Bell and Associates to review the hauler's financial statements and to perform a cost of service analysis, which is summarized with these following 3 steps. First, reported revenues and expenses are reviewed and tested for reasonableness to ensure accuracy in relation to the number of customers served, the number and size of bins collected, and the predicted tonnage of waste disposed. Next, future revenues and expenses are estimated using projected growth and inflationary cost drivers. And finally, a projected pre-tax return on revenue is calculated for each zone, and the proposed rate adjustments are evaluated to see whether or not they are necessary. Until recently, China has been the world's largest importer of recycled material, including most of Oregon's mixed paper and plastics. Chinese buyers would purchase these materials with higher levels of contamination and at higher prices than U.S. domestic markets could use or afford. In March of 2017, China enacted National Sword, which imposed severe restrictions on the import of recycled materials. In July of 2017, China announced a ban on importation of all post-consumer plastic and unsorted paper, along with other materials, effective at the end of the year. The abruptness and uncertainty created by China's announcement resulted in major disruptions in global recycling markets. This graph represents the price per ton for mixed recycled material that the haulers received and/or paid since January of 2017. In 2017, the haulers received, on average, 33 cents per ton of recycled material that they collected. In 2018, they paid an average of $82 per ton to the recycling processors. Revenue from the sale of recycled material no longer helps to offset the cost of providing solid waste services. The 2 other factors addressed in the proposal are the cost of disposal at Coffin Butte for Polk County and the price of diesel fuel. When forecasting fuel prices for this time last year, diesel was expected to increase 1.5% during 2018, and to account for volatility in the forecasting, we used 5% for 2019. Instead, diesel fuel is expected to increase at least 34% by the end of 2018, significantly more than originally forecasted. And also then, based on market forecasts, 2019 is expected to remain flat. The disposal fees in Polk County were also not forecasted to increase. Instead, an increase of 4.17% was increased in 2018, and 4.76% increase is expected in 2019. While changes in fuel and disposal costs alone may not have triggered an adjustment to the 2019 adopted rates, addressing them now with the recycling issues will help to minimize future increases. This slide demonstrates the results of the cost of service analysis, showing the pre-tax return on revenue last year in 2017 and the projected returns for 2018 and 2019. The return on revenue for Salem's haulers within the 2 zones are broken out separately because there are some notable differences in rates and variations in cost drivers used to calculate the return on revenue, such as disposal fees and transportation costs. In 2019, the pre-tax return on revenue for both zones were well below the target range of 8 to 12%. In 2019, the hauler's return will fall even lower without an adjustment to the 2019 rates. The lines of business, such as residential carts, commercial containers, or drop boxes, are calculated and reviewed separately. The city works with the haulers to ensure the balance between residential rates and commercial rates, and each line of business remains stable, one not subsidizing the other. This balance is important. Each hauler in Salem serves a different mix of customers. Some haulers have a higher number of commercial customers, while others serve more residential customers. This is why, as you'll see on the next slide, that different increases are requested for each line of business. This shows the proposed rate increases in the Marion County zone for roll cart, container, and drop box rental services. The proposal for cart services includes a 3.26% increase for operational costs and a $2 per month increase to address the increased cost of recycled services. This is approximately a 10.7% increase for a 35-gallon cart. Proposed increases to roll cart services do impact not only residents, but also multifamily units and commercial business, or some commercial businesses. Container services would increase 5.32%. 0.58% of that, so less than 1%, is related to operations, and 4.74% is due to increases in the cost of recycling. Drop box rentals, which are receptacles with intermittent collection and disposal, are proposed to increase 2.34%. None of that, the drop box, is related to the recycling issues. Additionally, for the Polk County zone, very similar. The proposal for cart services includes a 5.71% increase for operational costs and $2 again each month to address the increased cost of recycling. Container services would increase 9%. 1.71% is related to operations, with 7.29 due to the increases in the cost of recycling. And drop box rentals would increase 9.13%. So the big question is, how much would my bill go up? This slide shows for Marion County the impact of the proposed increases to the subscribers of cart services. The majority of residential customers subscribe to the 35-gallon service. That's the one I have myself. As customers are billed bi-monthly, so every 2 months, these figures represent 2 months of service. A subscriber of the 35-gallon service in Marion County would see an increase of $5.70 every 2 months, or $34.20 every year. In Polk County, again, this represents 2 months of service. Since we're billed every 2 months, a subscriber of the 35-gallon service in Polk County would see an increase of $6.40 on each bill, or $38.40 each year. So then the question is, how do we compare with other cities? When comparing the proposed residential monthly refuse rate for 35-gallon carts, the current rates in other Oregon cities and those with similar service levels, the rates in Salem remain consistent and comparable. Consistent with comparable cities. With a few exceptions, these rates displayed reflect adjustments made in other jurisdictions to address those the similar recycling issues. It's also important to note that haulers in Salem provide a number of services not available in many other communities, such as curbside food waste collection, curbside recycling of motor oil, antifreeze, paint, cooking oil, and household batteries. The most commonly used commercial container service is the 2-yard container. This graph shows how Salem's proposed 2-yard container rate compares with other jurisdictions. As I mentioned earlier, Salem maintains a practice of calculating and applying the cost of service to each line of service, targeting a 10% return on revenue for each line. A review of the comparable rates, the rate summary, shows that some other jurisdictions appear to apply or appear to allow a subsidization among lines of service. So when comparing this graph, which shows the most commonly used container service, with the previous one for residential service, it appears that there may be subsidization among lines of service in other cities. So on another related issue, I wanted to provide a quick update on the 20-gallon every other week service that was requested last time I was before you. In April of 2018, pilot program was started. Customers that were most likely to benefit from that program, which were existing 20-gallon customers and residents on an on-call service, were contacted to see if they would be, if this was a product that was interest of them. Unfortunately, there was generally low interest in it. However, likely some of that reduced interest was due to changes in the recycling and probably a lot of uncertainty as to what that was going to bring. Hopefully we'll see some increased interest in this program as recycling world and the global market stabilizes a bit. Another related topic is the collection of medical waste. So again, this time last year, Council considered a rate proposal for medical waste collection services in Salem. The low volume service, as described up here, received a 24.6% increase in 2018, while the high volume service was held flat until further review could be completed. That further review, that analysis, found that an increase for the low volume service of 8.4%, and an increase for the high volume service of 31.3% would be necessary for 2019 in order to maintain a sufficient return on revenue for these services. Something to note is that the high volume service has not been increased since 2012. And again, these rates reflect the continued effort to balance the cost of service between lines of service. For the low volume customers, the increase will be up to $2.35 per box, and for high volume customers, this increase represents up to $4.70 per box, depending on the box size and the number of boxes picked up. So, in conclusion, having performed the required analysis using the criteria identified in the Solid Waste Management Code, staff finds the rates proposed to be just, reasonable, and adequate. Therefore, staff recommends that the City adopt Resolution Number 2018-81, establishing new solid waste management service rates. If adopted by the City Council, these rates would go into effect January 1st, 2019, as listed in Exhibit A of the resolution, and subscribers will receive a 30-day notice of the rate changes from their hauler. I wanted to leave you with this slide. Just kind of generally describes our current curbside recycling program. I apologize, it's a little small, but we'll get a little bit more information, I think, with our testimony. And I'm happy to answer any questions following that testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. William Postgate?
Thank you. You're pronouncing it right. I appreciate that. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for having me speak. I am Will Postgate. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Garten Services. We are a nonprofit in Salem. Our mission is to employ, to give jobs and find jobs for people with disabilities. We have been in the recycling industry since about 1974, so we've been doing it a little while. I've been there about 6 years. I'm here to give you a little bit of a, I have 3 minutes also, right? Is that?
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
Thank you. I'm here to give you a little bit of a quick perspective on the processor's point of view. So a processor is who the haulers deliver their curbside material to separate into individual commodities and sell to the world, right? So, and it takes very expensive machinery and a lot of labor to do so. So recycling does cost money, especially in a market like this. When China decided to stop buying recycled material, it affected not just our local area, it's a worldwide situation, and it's a serious situation. When this happened, we had just put a couple $1 million worth of equipment as an upgrade into our system, having not really predicted this drastic change. And if you were in some sort of a program where you're doing a case study, imagine a business where you had to add labor, slow down your production line, and and realize some drastic price changes to the negative. In some places, items that we were selling for, say, $50 a ton, we now have to pay over $100 a ton to get rid of. So that gives you an idea of the market change. It's not a, it's kind of a perfect storm in the business sense. And this, again, is not a local problem. We, as haulers and processors and Marion County, have gotten together and have done some outreach and lots of education. I know the haulers have spent lots of time in outreach and education. We give, at Garten, we give tours constantly. We offer tours to the council members. We go to state agencies and to entities, corporations, to educate as far as the Recycle Right campaign. The contamination and the contamination difference that China has expected used to be about 5% or 1.5%, now down to 0.5% is impossible to meet, which is why we have slowed down the line and added people to try to even sell domestically, because a lot of the domestic markets have also increased their contamination requirements, or decreased the requirement, increased their...
Sorry,
That's okay. I just wanted to give you a quick brief.
Councilor
Happy to
Hoy.
answer any questions.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you told me in a previous meeting that you excuse me, that you spent as many as 2 hours out of every 8-hour shift cutting plastic bags out of your equipment. Is that correct?
Before the shift, yes.
Okay, and so 2 hours a day, or 2 hours out of every 8 hours, you're cutting plastic bags out. And do you have any idea how that impacts your costs?
Yes, it increases them.
Let me be more precise in my question.
It's an increase in our maintenance costs, additional maintenance people, and additional laborers to do such a task. I mean, they have to actually harness in and cut that stuff out. It's not just plastic bags, that's a lot of it. I know that that's something that's coming up, but it's also anything that could possibly wrap around quickly spinning machinery.
And just to be clear, that's from people putting things that are not appropriate in the blue bins, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank
That
you.
is absolutely correct.
Councilor Cook?
Yes. Imagine a vacuum cleaner in that thing. You know, when you get a vacuum cleaner stuck on a piece of string or something, times about 2 million. Yeah.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I know the education campaign that's been happening in the community to encourage recycling. Has there been any sort of effort on the opposite side of that to encourage proper waste disposal for the items, specifically with plastic bags, but with other items that are your frequent flyers, your most common culprits? I know diapers came up because a lot of items are marketed as recyclable, and then in really small font it'll say where, if facility exists in your area. Not only with the shifts, but just the way people try to market green products. I'm just thinking of when we've had in the past turn-in events or, come dispose of this here, the community responds really well and it can help clean up the waste stream. Is there anything like that happening with your most common offenders?
I think there's been some talk of doing something like that. Are you speaking of finding the most common offenders and then seeing what else to do with them? Like, where else should you put your diapers besides the garbage, that kind of thing? Like, we get a lot of clothing and shoes. I don't know why people think shoes are recyclable. I would love to participate in that. It's all educational to me. There are other places, as you guys know, to take styrofoam. There are places. Your plastic bag should go back to the grocery store. I could talk all day about that, and would love to help educate more on that. If you organize something like that, we can talk about the biggest offenders and how to divert.
So it sounds like you're willing to be a partner in any sort of work being done.
Absolutely, that's part of the job.
Wonderful, thank you.
You've seen the proposal for a rate increase. Will that resolve the issues you're facing in terms of your costs? I mean, does it get you back to some sort of even ground?
Well, we're all in this together. You're right. Yes, it helps. It definitely helps, and we're working our best to be more and more efficient and equipment and everything. So, I would encourage anyone that's in the room to I will give you a personal tour of the place so you get an idea. It's hard to imagine if you haven't been to a MRF, which is a recovery facility for recycling, to see it with your eyes. It really opens your eyes. And
Councilor Kaiser.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Will, for coming down. And I have been to Garton fairly recently, actually, and saw firsthand the whole plastic bags stuck in gears and all the labor it takes to cut those out. My question is, I can't remember what was said on that tour, but where does Garton primarily sell its recyclables to now that China's kind of, I mean, are we still selling to China?
No, there are other
Who are
countries.
our people?
There are other countries that for a while were taking some of the plastics, but you had to pay to get rid of them. There isn't really a market for those now. We have, because we've been in the business for so long, and we're lucky to be in Oregon, we have domestic markets for a lot of our fiber, and the fiber is the big revenue generator. Plastic, of course, is by volume a problem because it's everywhere. By weight, it's fairly small. Your cardboard and your fiber are the big ones, and luckily we have some markets there. Now, some of the mixed waste that you'll say your junk mail and those kind of things that aren't pure white paper or cardboard, that market has fallen to almost nothing, and we're hoping that there will be some local industry kind of prop up to take some of that and make it somewhat profitable.
So what about the plastics? Are those being sold at all to a recycler or I don't know what you call it, but
Well,
will anybody buy that stuff now?
Not at the moment.
So what's happening to it?
Some of it is getting just stored in our warehouse, and so and we're constantly looking for markets for that. But really, you have to pay, and I'm talking about the 3 through 7s. Your plastic milk jugs, your water bottles, and your detergent bottles. Those are saleable. But the 3 through 7s, there really isn't a market, and that's kind of the issue.
Okay, and then one last question. If we had perfect recycling, meaning the customer was a perfect recycler, would the problem be solved with recycling?
By perfect, you mean?
Like I was
No,
perfect. I did all of the
that.
things, and I was like zero contamination. Would the problem be solved at this moment?
At this moment, if everything were perfect, I suppose it. I hate to say solved.
I hate to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it certainly would help, and it would cost a lot less to recycle because we wouldn't have a $25,000 to $50,000 garbage bill each month. Yeah. I mean, we would all benefit. Everyone in the room, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Reed Carlson.
Mr. Mayor,
Reed.
members of the council. While I'm setting up my presentation, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Reed Carlson. I'm the Marketing and Recycling Coordinator for Mid-Valley Garbage and Recycling Association. One of my roles is to go out and educate people about how to recycle right in Marion County. And Salem shares the recycling program, of course, with Marion County, so hopefully you'll learn a lot. Lately, we've been getting a lot of questions about what are we seeing at the curbside recycling level. What did the truck drivers see is a common question, and then what kind of plastics can I actually recycle? So I have a few pictures collected from a local hauler, and I'm just going to talk about some of the contaminations that we see quite often. So as you can see in this picture, all the contaminants are in red arrows. Glass has never been allowed in mixed recycling. It is perfectly recyclable when you do put it in that bin. Film plastic, again, that's a really large contaminant, and that's both in the form of this bubble wrap and the Amazon plastic shipping bag. And the next slide, we have this cardboard box that has styrofoam and a plastic window in it. When the plastic window is removed and the styrofoam is removed, that cardboard box is perfectly recyclable. When it's not, it is considered a contaminated item. In the next slide, we have food, which is a lovely piece of art, but that's never been allowed in the mixed recycling. Same with paper plates. That plastic hanger in the top right corner, that's considered a non-programmed plastic, meaning it's not a bottle or a jug. And then the laminated piece of paper is just a plastic sheet at this point and not paper.
Oh, so that junk mail wouldn't be recyclable? If you go
Some
back?
junk mail. The plastic junk mail is not recyclable. All other junk mail paper is. And then moving on to this video is just a picture of the hopper cam. This is what the truck driver actually sees. As you can see, the items are kind of mixed, and this is how we can see the full cart's materials. And there is often contaminants. So moving on to the show and tell portion, I brought some items. So, no, yeah. These are plastic jugs. As you can see, the openings are smaller than the base, and jugs typically have handles. Bottles, again, have smaller openings compared to the base. They can come in all different shapes and sizes. That's where a lot of things are confusing. But bottles and jugs are the two plastic recyclable items in Marion County. Some of the recently removed plastic items are plastic tubs. As you can see, plastic tubs have wider openings than the base. Jars have a similar size, but oftentimes, as you can see with this one, it is pretty dirty. Even though it's been washed out, this grease can pass to other fibrous materials. And this is a combination of the two. Relatively large opening where, as you can see, other items can fall inside. And these can often have different types of plastic resins. And I'm out of time. So I'll take any questions.
Have you
and I'll
got
do
something
more.
else? This is good. Have you got something else? You wanna-
Yeah.
Start again, Casey.
So this is a Amazon envelope. They have started to move to the plastic envelopes, as you saw earlier in the presentation. That actually says right on it, store drop-off and not curbside. So that's really important to distinguish because those plastic bags do have a home when you recycle it properly. It's just not allowed in the mixed recycling. So as you can see here, it looks like paper on the outside. On the inside, there is some sort of plastic material that keeps moisture from coming in during transportation, and it's also bonded with bubble wrap. So this is not recyclable, even though it looks like a paper envelope. And then my last item, a lot of office supplies come in this sort of packaging. You need to make sure you remove the plastic completely. This goes in the garbage, and this is just cardboard or gray board, as we call it.
Okay. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question about the video. Do all of the haulers have that equipment on their trucks now?
I believe all of the haulers do. This is an example of one that was easily recordable.
I've just seen a lot of comments about, from folks who say that, you know, I don't know why they think that I had contaminants in my recycling, they didn't even look, and really they're watching their camera. So I'm just curious if all the haulers are watching their cameras. And I mean, to me, that's quite high quality video. It's quite plain that there's a lot of contaminants in there. Oh, yeah. I'm not an expert, but I can spot it a mile away. So that's what the garbage haulers are looking at when they're picking up your blue bin. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Are they issuing fines? I had one complaint that I can recall.
So they're considered contamination fees, and from what I
I'm sorry.
understand, sorry.
Or tax. I just don't know your lingo.
And they're built into the rates, and that's because whenever we see or you see any of these items in a roll cart or in the trucks, it takes effort and time to get those materials back out because they don't belong there and they should be in the garbage.
So you are issuing
Haulers are issuing fees for
Are they fairly
contaminated
common?
goods.
Do you know?
It varies from hauler to hauler,
Okay.
from my belief.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Cook.
Thank you. So it was in the report with sharps containers and disposal of sharps, and I know we're primarily focusing on plastic because of the green sword and that change, but are you seeing a significant difference in sharp contamination in what the haulers are seeing? Just the facilities in the community, is that coming up at all?
I personally don't have any information about that. I mostly educate people about what goes in, what stays out.
And sharps wouldn't be disposable unless they're in the container, the sharps container?
Correct. Yeah, we're talking, the curbside mixed recycling is what we're really trying to focus on currently. But sharps and other medical waste are considered a really dangerous contaminant for those carts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Reed. Estelle Harlan.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett and Council. I'm Estelle Harlan, Solid Waste Management Consultant for the Mid-Valley Garbage and Recycling Association. You know, we did not expect to be before you tonight, but then costs that were out of our control happened. You've heard them described, so I'm not going to go over all of them, but where we were having a little bit of offsetting revenue, it never covered our full cost for recycling, but it did offset some. That's non-existent now. And we do believe that this is a temporary condition to some extent as domestic markets develop. And we think one of the key pieces you've heard tonight is recycling education. People like Reed working with the association are going to make a big difference on folks understanding how to keep their recycling clean. And we're constantly upgrading that education as we get feedback from our customers. You've heard that a second major condition is fuel. When you estimate 1.5% and it's actually 34%, that's huge. And we have 3 trucks on the streets for every household. So fuel is a huge issue. Going back to the recycling, I wanted to say that it's also a very big deal when we don't get that revenue. There are over 60,000 carts out there in unincorporated Marion County and City of Salem. 42,500 of those recycling carts are in the city. So this loss of revenue is significant. And then the Polk County waste, we did not anticipate that there would be any increase at the Coffin Butte landfill. Polk County, when the burner is at capacity, we have to take it to Coffin Butte, and right currently the burner is at maximum capacity. We estimated no increase in disposal, and instead there are increases both in 2018 and 2019 at Coffin Butte. The requested increase covers all 3 lines of service, solid waste, recycling, and mixed organics. We have recognized big efficiencies through automation. We've adapted, we've automated, but we cannot eliminate costs. We are doing everything we can to control costs, but these costs that you've heard tonight are beyond our control. We are trying to find ways for customers to cut their costs, and you heard one possible solution tonight. If you don't need weekly recycling, call us, and we can do an on-call service. Just call us when the cart is full. That could be an option. We've really appreciated working with the city and on this process this year, one that we had not thought we would be here tonight doing, but we appreciate the attention you've given us.
Thanks, Estelle. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the comparative rate summary that you provided in our packet,
Yes.
I have a question about the disposal fees. And I noticed the one fee that I really wanted to read wasn't there. It said Coffin Butte varies. And I noticed we had a percentage of an increase tonight, but I don't know percentage of what.
So that is the average increase for the haulers in the city of Salem, and it is a private contract, and so we don't have a rate that we put out like the burner does for Coffin
So
Butte.
I can't know how much they charge us on the west side of the river?
I can get that information for you, but it's not something I can put out publicly.
I would like that information, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the same question I guess I asked earlier, and that's, it sounds like there's really multiple issues here for the reasons why you're coming tonight asking for this, increases. The recycling on one hand, and then fuel costs on the other, and then disposal costs, it also sounds like. So if we had perfect recycling, would we be here tonight, I guess is my question.
We likely would be holding. We had thought this was going to be a hold year. And the fuel in itself was huge. I mean, it turned out being way more than what we had anticipated, but I think we still could have ridden it out. At this point, when you combine them all together in what has been described as a perfect storm, it isn't possible.
And I don't know if this is appropriate for you to answer, or perhaps staff, or perhaps both, but as I was reading in the staff report here, and I have to just quickly find it again, but fuel costs, like you said, were actual, projected for 1.5% in 2018. Actual was 34%. Projected 2019, 5%, and then what is projected, kind of a new projection, is 0. And I find that a little hard to believe, frankly, since they've increased 34% this year, to say that next year it's going to be nothing. Where does that come from? Because it kind of seems like we're going to get back into the situation where we're saying, oh, yeah, we're going to be totally fine next year, and then next year's going to happen, and we're going to say, ugh. So
Yeah.
I'm
We
confused
look at-
by that, I guess.
Yeah, we look at indexes from month to month, and we have worked with staff and with Chris Bell on this, and that hold for next year is what we think will be reasonable. No increase. I mean, there'll still be, we've already got the 34 in there.
Okay, Councilor McQuaid?
I think this is following along with Councilor Hoy's question, but I was interested, you said, well, if the burners at capacity are going to Coffin Butte, my understanding Coffin Butte was a lot less expensive to use than the burners, so wouldn't that be to your advantage if the burners at capacity and you're sending it to Coffin Butte, aren't you not saving money?
Well, we're saving money from going to the burner, yes. Of course, the burner has flow control, so we go to the burner when there's capacity. And Marion County goes to the burner. Polk County, if there's not capacity, then they go to Coffin Butte, and you're right, it's lower. But it's an increase in the lower price. It's definitely a lower price, but they have increased by the amounts that were indicated.
Okay, so I misunderstood you. I thought you were saying if the burners at capacity, you're taking Marion County.
No, we're taking Polk County when the burner's at capacity.
So then
Well, occasionally.
Two questions
maybe
then.
we
If
have to do, but it's, no, they're telling me no.
No?
Not ever.
So the burners at capacity, it just piles up somewhere till it's not at capacity?
You don't take anybody else's.
No.
No what?
That's a no, you don't take anybody else's. That is a burner question, and I can't tell you what the operations at the burner, how they manage that, but they manage to take all of Marion County.
So then back to the Coffin Butte, why did the prices go up? What was their justification? If you didn't think it was going to go up and it hadn't gone up in the past years, why this year would it go up?
They're a private company, and they essentially said they had cost increases that, the CPI and some of the same cost increases that we're experiencing.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, Suzanne Kaltwasser.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I submitted to you some written comments, and hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at those. Late this afternoon, I submitted a minor correction, so hopefully you catch that too. My name is Suzanne Kaltwasser, and I live in Ward 8. And I wanted to, tonight you've been looking at the business side of garbage collection. And I wanted to speak to the environmental side of the issue and draw your attention to the need to look at a variety of issues having to do with the impact of garbage production in our community. You may not be aware, for example, that according to Marion County Solid Waste Committee, Salem, amount of garbage is actually increasing. And that was before the recycling debacle with China. And we don't really know why, but people for some reason are either making more money and spending more things, getting more stuff or whatever, but they're generating more garbage. And so we are a major contributor to the Marion County incinerator. And you heard tonight that the incinerator has reached capacity. You may recall about a year ago, I made you aware of the fact that Marion County is signing a new long-term contract with Covanta to operate that incinerator. And part of the reason why they want a long-term contract is because they want to expand the capacity at that incinerator and extend it out, hopefully 20 more years. But there are environmental as well as economic reasons why I believe that the City of Salem should be actively engaged in that discussion around whether or not you want to be extending a contract for an incinerator. That incinerator pollutes. It especially pollutes in greenhouse gases. The emissions of CO2 from that incinerator are equivalent to 30,000 vehicles in our airshed. And the council has a goal to do a CO2 greenhouse gas emissions evaluation and to develop policies and codes around how to reduce those emissions. So what I'm really strongly urging you have a lot of questions here that were not answered, is that you schedule as soon as possible a work session with Marion County and look at not just the economic sides of it, but the environmental sides, and perhaps invite some people with expertise to give you some background information and see whether or not you might be able to convince Marion County to not enter at this time into a long-term contract, but maybe a short-term contract while we look at some of these very important issues in greater detail.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Ryan, you want to come up and see if anybody has any questions? Does anyone else want to testify on this? Okay, Ryan.
So I wrote down a couple of the questions, and I might be able to answer some of them.
Oh, okay.
Get those out of the way, if
Let's
that
just
would be okay with the
get ahead
council.
of this thing.
So, and I certainly don't want to speak out of turn, so if it gets too in-depth, we have quite the panel of experts over here from our Haulers Association.
Oh, okay.
And so if it's beyond my expertise and knowledge, I'd like to invite them up for any of those particular questions. But just initially, the contamination fees, a question about that was asked. Yes, as part of the rate sheet that's before you tonight is a contamination fee, and that is adopted by council with all the other rates. My understanding is that the point of that is to kind of catch a person's attention. Say, hey, there was contamination. The fee was put on the bill, and that first time it's an invitation, if you will, for communication, either for that customer to call the hauler, and in some cases when the haulers have the capacity in their staff, they'll actually call the customers as well to address what the contamination issue was, to again use that as an education opportunity, and many times that contamination fee will be waived on that first time. If there's continued and repeat offenses, I understand that typically that contamination fee is not waived as often. As far as Coffin Butte tipping fees, was a question on that was asked. And my records here and what we were using for our calculation in 2017, the tipping fee was just over $30, $30.24, I think was the average for the year. Again, it varies a little bit, but that was the average rate. In 2018, it went up to $31.50, again representing that increase. And then we're expecting about a $33 tipping fee for 2019 is the number that was used for that calculation.
Okay.
There's a question about fuel in terms of the increase, what was expected versus what we're seeing now. I appreciate your question, Councilor. In terms of 2019, you know, there's some science and there's some art, to be quite frank. When we're looking at indices that show, of course, where we've been, this is diesel fuel and as specific to this mark as we can, not looking nationwide, but as specific to what we have here. Interestingly enough, we see a steep increase in 2018. The projections that we're looking at, highly rated. I apologize, I don't have the specific agency in front of me, but they were actually showing a decrease in increase for 2018, and then actually a decrease in 2019 in the diesel fuel prices. So to hedge a little bit, we decided to keep it flat rather than to actually decrease it for next year. So we're actually building in a little bit of a buffer there, we're hoping. Of course, this is, if I had a crystal ball, we're working with the clearest ball that we can find. And I think that's all that I wrote down, but I'm happy to take any more questions.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Ryan, for that information. I just wanted to follow up. So I think I heard you say $30.24 was the tipping fee at Coffin Butte, and that compares, if I'm correct, to $87.45 at Covanta, as I read in the staff report. Is that?
That sounds right.
So $30 compared to $87, depending on which side of the river you're on.
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask about how we establish the price or the cost for the various size roll carts, because it seems like the people who produce the least amount of garbage, in other words, the folks who do the 20-gallon, they pay the highest per gallon cost. Now, I understand that there's a certain fixed cost just to have a cart and to have the truck stop at the house. I get that part, but it seems like we're really penalizing those folks who are producing the least amount of trash. And I was hoping you could speak to that.
So again, and as you mentioned, I think you hit on a couple of good points. One is there's fixed costs, whether it's a 20-gallon cart or it's a 65-gallon cart, the truck is still driving down your road, and there are quite a few fixed costs associated with that. The variable piece of that is the average tonnage or weight and volume of the trash that's in those carts. So this is where my expertise is going to wane a little bit, and so if we need a little bit more expertise, I can call them up. But so based on the average, again, weight and volume of those carts, the cost that's associated with that is then applied to each of those sizes. Did that answer your question?
It may have, but I didn't understand it.
Do you mean you fill the small cart tighter and more? Is that?
That's what I was saying.
Is that a technical explanation?
So there, if there's, as I understand, there's been some tests from time to time as to what obviously we know the volume of the carts. They're 20, 35, and 65-gallon carts. There's also an average weight associated with the volume of that garbage, and so the disposal cost that goes to whether it be Coffin Butte or to Covanta is by ton. And so there's a weight cost that's then applied back to the weight and volume of those carts and the amount of trash that is collected in those.
Okay.
That's the variable piece.
Thank you. I think I got it that time.
Okay.
If one of the discussions about Covanta, because it was made the decision was made so many years ago, is what's the alternative? And my understanding is if we didn't have Covanta, we're going to have to site a landfill somewhere near Salem. Do I understand how we would deal with that? I am not clear what happens.
My understanding is there are two areas in the state of Oregon, Marion County and Metro in Portland, that are legislated. So there's state legislation that provide flow control for those two areas in the state of Oregon. If Salem were to pursue an alternative to the Covanta burner, we would need state legislative change.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, I'm going to, I guess, ask a follow-up question to that. I remember when the burner went in, it received some kind of award, and now tonight we're hearing that it's maybe a major pollutant, not as environmentally safe as a landfill. And so can I have somebody explain the value of the burner? Because it costs more, and if it's polluting more, then maybe we could drive everything to Coffin Butte and save money and save the environment. But I don't know, I'm confused. The burner got an award for something, and now we're hearing it's not good.
That is not something that I am able to speak to. I'm looking at a representative from Marion County to see if he wants to take this one, or if there's something that you'd want to address.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council members. Brian May, Marion County Environmental Services Division Manager. Apologize, I'm kind of pitch hinting tonight for one of our commissioners that's down at the AOC conference. I think the question that's arisen on greenhouse gases is something that's kind of been in play for a number of years and been coming up in discussions on carbon sequestering and what's appropriate, whether it's in a landfill or if it's incinerated. And that's one of those kind of policy discussions that's out there. One of the things that Marion County has stood on is that we wanted to manage our own waste. We wanted to deal with it within Marion County. And you go back, roll that clock back 30 years, and that's where the incinerator came into play. To kind of address some of the other questions that kind of came up, we are in contract negotiations with Cavanna, and rest assured we are taking these things into consideration as we look for that future. And we are not looking at expanding the burner at this time, but we are looking at shorter term contracts and addressing some of these concerns.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you. Brian, glad you're here tonight. Can you talk about any of the needed repairs for Covanta and what that's expected to run?
You betcha. We contracted a consultant to kind of do an evaluation of our whole entire solid waste system, Gershman, Brickner, and Bratton. Part of their work and study they did was kind of a comparison of Cavanna, Marion, and what's it look like and how's it compare being a 30-year-old facility. There's a sister facility in Kent, Michigan that was commissioned about the same time and almost exactly the same size. It's in much worse condition than Cavanna, Marion. One thing I can applaud Cavanna locally is being up on top of their maintenance and addressing concerns and evaluating future needs. That being said, it is a 30-year-old facility, and we are anticipating capital investments again to keep that operational. What the numbers we've seen is projections in somewhere about $48.8 million over the next 15 years. We are kind of looking at that and timing and when that would be needed and how we'd address that.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you. And just a follow-up question. That facility in Kent, Michigan, I'm sure has its own microclimate to deal with. But I know even the forest fires, whether it was last year with Eagle Creek or recently in California, we have our own issues as far as particulate air pollution. I know greenhouse gases was brought up, but I'm specifically talking about air pollution particulates. What steps has the incinerator taken to show that they're addressing the microclimate specific to our region?
So the main things we look at there is real-time data collection that's reported to DEQ literally on a minute-by-minute on stack analysis. That's kind of that monitoring of key indicators to determine if there are issues, along with annual stack test monitoring. Cavanna has routinely, consistently come under the thresholds and requirements of DEQ and EPA.
Okay. I'm just very interested in that, considering the new links with air pollution.
Correct.
In relation to a manner of issues.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor McCoy.
This is probably for Ryan. I'm sitting there, it seems like with the hauling issue here, to me there's some disconnect when you're at $87 a ton at the burner. Is that what it is? And 30 at Coffin Butte, basically?
Yep. Yes.
So that's almost three times as much, but you look at the rates, and they're not three times as much. And if everything else is, fuel and labor and trucks and equipment and Well, okay, but that's 30% more? I'm just saying, is that, what drives, if it's 3 times more, how does then, we're paying 3 times more, but the amounts between the two entities are not showing that big of a diversion in pricing? Why is that?
So we do have a difference in those rates between Marion and Polk County, and that difference is calculated out to be primarily the difference. So there's the disposal cost, Covanta versus Coffin Butte, and I think as Councilor Nainke may have mentioned, the transport cost to Coffin Butte is much greater than to Covanta. So there's greater fuel and transport costs for that. That offsets some of the savings for Coffin Butte, and those two issues they're kind of opposing forces. But those are the two main factors for the cost variance between the Polk County side and Marion County side.
So you're saying the hauling to Coffin Butte makes up for 3 times the.
No, it doesn't make up for 3 times.
Or it makes up a big amount of it.
But that's also why we have a fairly significant difference in the rates between Marion and Polk County. Marion County is, so for instance, for a 35-gallon roll cart, Marion County proposed rate is $29.50 per month, and Polk County is $23.85. Yeah. So we're looking at a little less than $6 a month difference.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I just had a question, I guess, or maybe if you could explain, Ryan, as far as the city's targeting of 10% rate of revenue return on revenue. Could you just talk about that and explain? Because it seems like under the proposed rates, or what we have going into 2019, we're looking at a combined return on revenue of 3.4%. And in Polk County specifically, 0.1%, which is quite a bit below 10%. But could you just talk about kind of what the city is trying to do there in terms of targeting at this 10% as a return on revenue?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. So the 10% is a target. Simply it's a industry standard that, as mentioned, a number of other cities have codified, and it's used by many in the industry to allow, again, it's a pre-tax return on revenue, so there's taxes in that taken after the fact, but it's something that is targeted then that allows the haulers to stay in business, to be able to purchase capital needs, to continue updates on their equipment and machinery, allows them to a sufficient margin to stay in business so that, to be blunt, the city doesn't have to take that service on themselves, in which case would likely cost even more.
So would it be a fair assessment to say that if we were kind of to do nothing, or to say, no, we're not going to raise rates, and we have this kind of really low return on revenue, that we could potentially see some of these companies go out of business, which might increase our costs overall? Would that be a fair assessment over a long period of time?
Yes, I think that would be a fair assessment.
Correct. Thank you.
Brian, did you want to?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of jump back on the comparative rate between Coffin Butte. One thing I'd like to point out is that the rate at the incinerator has more than just disposal factored into that. When you think of the entire solid waste system in Marion County, we have 2 transfer stations. We have a household hazardous waste facility. We've got this robust recycling system. That all also factors into that. So when you isolate it with just the disposal cost for Polk County, we're not really comparing those apples to apples. So there's just a whole lot more involved in that.
So the whole mix is $87. We're paying for kind of all of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So the division I'm responsible for is funded purely by franchise fees, tipping rates, and the main one being at the burner to handle all our recycling programs and those other things like the household hazardous waste facilities.
Well, what would be the net sort of comparable between Covanta and Coffin Butte? I mean, what
That's a great question, and I don't have that before me tonight. Sorry.
Okay. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to mention this, but having spoken to some of the elected officials in Marion County and some of the staff, and precisely on the issue that you're talking about there, I think it would be in our best interest to have a work session with the Board of County Commissioners to really delve into that question and some of these other questions. And I think that we could really benefit from understanding all of these issues that $87, that makes up that $87 fee. And I know I personally would like to understand it better because right now I don't understand it. And I really think that we need to be looking at all of the costs around Covanta and getting a better and a fuller understanding. I would really like to encourage all of my colleagues to jump on board with that idea. I mentioned it a year ago, but we didn't quite get enough momentum. And I think we have an opportunity right now. We have Commissioner Carlson leaving at the end of the year, and I think we should do it before she leaves to take advantage of some of her expertise. I've spoken with her personally about that idea, and she, I don't want to speak for her, but I think she'd be very amenable to it.
Yeah, I think it's something we need to do. I think we should look at it in our goals and policy discussion, put it in there, and make sure we do it the first part of the year. Make sure we have a January, February, we get a handle. I'm not sure. I don't want to apply it to this discussion if that's okay. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, but I think it's something we've got to get an understanding of.
And I don't want to apply it to this discussion either, but I would like to I would like to leave tonight with a commitment to do a work session.
I think you have one.
Great, thank you.
You have one. Go ahead.
I just want to voice my support for my co-councilor Hoy. I couldn't agree more and think that the time is important. Well spoken, and thank you.
I'll commit to you too that we'll have a work session. You too, McCoy. I can see your hand up.
Well, I won't be here, so.
Oh, that's right.
Wait.
We'll just have you come back for that work session.
You better hurry up, and don't put it on the third Monday in December, because
Okay. Well, I think we're ready then to move forward.
Yes.
So I'm going to close the hearing. Councilor McCoy,
I move staff recommendation.
I move second.
second by Nanki. Any discussion? All those, Councilor Kaiser, boy, you guys are, I got to get a quicker gavel.
Sorry, I just want to say I think that this is a tough vote because we just did this last year. And it's a lot more complicated than just recycling.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the big takeaway that I think the public needs to understand is it's not just recycling. I think you heard from a couple people here today, even if we had perfect recycling and every person was a perfect recycler, we'd still have a problem.
Yeah.
And I agree, we need to understand the issue better because what I want to avoid is this happening every year. And we get slapped in the face with rising costs unexpectedly, and then we come back kind of mid-cycle and say we need more money to do this. So, but I think it's a more multifaceted than just recycling.
Well, too, I think of how much work goes into the water wastewater when we deal with these various utility rates where we have a whole committee that just works on this thing steadily for a couple of years to put together a cost of service analysis and all the rest of it. We can certainly invest the time to at least become educated to where when they say tipping fee, we all know exactly what we're talking about and what it means. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would rather not have to vote for this tonight, but I absolutely will be supporting this rate increase. We owe it to our haulers to help them stay in business, and since we control what they can charge, I think we owe it to them to authorize this rate increase, but I would much rather not do that. I want to take some steps, if possible, to avoid this in the future, but I think this is one of those necessary evils that we just have to do it.
Councilor McCoy.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for this, too. Remember, these are businesses. But these are businesses don't get don't get to set their pricing. They have to come to us sort of hat in hand saying, hey, we're losing money. That doesn't happen almost anywhere else in the city. That the prices go up and you pay them. That's number one. Number two, again, remember, this 10% sounds like a lot of money, but that's before taxes. So that's not what they're putting in their pocket. That's before taxes, and they're paying the taxes, and it probably cuts it in half, I would guess. Pretty close, you guys? I'm guessing, but... So that makes a difference, too. 10% sounds great until you say, well, yeah, but that's before. It'd be just like us. We got gross pay and then what we pay for, we actually put in our pocket and take home. It's not quite what our gross pay is. Same thing for these folks. So they need this. This is a service that's required in the city. I think they do a wonderful job, and we owe it to them to pass this and make sure they're whole for the next year.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll also be supporting this, and if you look at, our rates for most of our utilities as well, there's those costs that deal with personnel, healthcare, all those other overhead pieces that are always there. Fuel over the years will always go up as well. So similar to our water rates, where we're on that rate slope, essentially we have to look at that similarly. They'll have to replace all their capital as well, and so the trick is trying to keep it, going up at a rate that's in opposition to how much people are making to actually be able to pay that, because then we run into that fixed income element of the community that screams at every rate increase that we throw that direction as well. So we need to be cognizant of that. We need to try to control costs across the board through all of our utility services.
Yeah, I agree. Probably the one thing I would ask staff to kind of keep track of through code enforcement is if we have, because of someplace there is a number that people start dropping service and start piling it up in the backyard in the garage, and I want to make sure we're keeping close track of that because that is one of the other factors as we set rates. So I hope we'll keep that in mind, and maybe we can have just a check-in with us when we do have some sort of working session on, a work session rather, on this issue, that we can understand where that number is. Because there is a point where people becomes very price sensitive and we have to be pretty cautious. So. Okay, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay? Oh, Andersen. We'll take just a second to link up with Councilor Andersen.
$10 to use a Francis McDormand accent from
Well, no, because he's 2 hours ahead of us, so he's already in bed.
10:30.
You put that on the resume. Does it have to be this meeting? Like, yeah, it's weird. We can just move it here.
No, we just voted down now. I don't want this hanging out over me.
I'm gonna have to separate you two.
Seriously?
Change his number.
Oh, hey, don't be afraid you can. Hey, you're asleep.
Tells you a lot about Minnesota telephone.
Give us the right number.
I have his number if you need it.
Do we have a cell number for him?
Yeah.
Could you call him and tell him we probably
I've
don't
been
have...
texting with him, he's expecting our call, and now he's been keeping track where the meeting is going to be.
Hey, we have a policy, mister.
Yeah.
To facilitate the meeting. Obviously.
No, 698, 689. Numbers are switched. It's easy.
Okay. Heading into time and a half for this council now. Let's go.
Cost extra.
There we go.
Councilman Andersen.
Hello, Councilor Andersen. We're ready to go with your motion, so welcome to the meeting.
Great, thank you very much.
You bet. By the way, you were easier to reach in Bhutan than you were in Minnesota.
Yes, well, Minnesota is closer to my heart in Salem than Boomtown, Bhutan. So, here we go, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I move to direct staff to prepare a resolution for council's consideration to provide for a stipend for members of council in the amount of up to $2,000 a month for councilors and up to $2,500 a month for the mayor, and that a hearing be scheduled on December 3rd, 2016 for council to receive testimony and deliberate on the matter.
Second by Ossick. Go ahead, Councilor, discuss your motion.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and councilors, it has been my honor to serve on Salem City Council in the current term and in my upcoming second term. I am glad that I am able to make sacrifices and will continue to be able to make sacrifices necessary to achieve this honor. This is an honor that should be realistically extended to all eligible citizens of Salem. Right now, practically speaking, it is not. The large majority of the current and former councilors come from one or more of the following categories. Someone who is independently wealthy, a retiree, state and local government employees, or employees of organizations closely connected to governmental agencies, self-employed persons, and are for the most part Caucasian. There are large segments of Salem community do not fit the above profile. 22% of our population is Latino or Hispanic. An additional 12% are other racial or ethnic groups. 68% are Caucasian. The median household income in Salem is $49,000, and there are 17% of the households in Salem are below the poverty level. These are voices that need to be heard on the council. These are people who can and should provide a valuable perspective on issues that confront our city. So how can we give voice on the council to these folks? One reason among many, but nevertheless a very important reason, is that the honor of serving as the councilor is not available to these persons on financial grounds. The proposed stipend is one way to overcome these financial constraints, which inhibit and prohibit service on council, and to move toward a fuller representation of all of Salem on the council. How much will this cost? An important factor given the current $6 million deficit. Well, first of all, the motion calls for up to $2,000 and up to $2,500, which is a clear indication that it could be less after a full discussion. Secondly, at the upper limit, that is at the $2,000 and $2,500, the yearly amount is 0.037 of $6 million. And at a limit of, say, $1,500 or $2,000 and $2,000, the yearly amount is 0.031% of $6 million. And finally, if any counselor who is satisfied with only the honor and not any stipend, they can refuse to return the money. I submit that the very small cost is worth the the potentially large benefit. Let's have a full public discussion of this matter. The motion should pass.
Okay, any discussion? Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely agree with the goal of increasing representation on this council from the, and I do believe a stipend would help with that. But I have a fundamental problem with us paying, authorizing pay for ourselves. I don't think that that's the way to go about this. As I mentioned to my colleague on the phone, in person, when we discuss this, I think the way to do this would be to refer it to the voters, and if they decide that they want to do this, to allow them to do it at that point. So I'll be voting no on this motion.
Councilor Cook?
I'm in agreement with Councilor Hoy. As someone who is fortunate enough to have a spouse and family that are supportive, and also someone who has young children, I understand that there's a need for childcare, there's a need to be an equalizer in order to have a full representation of voices on this panel, but I would also suggest that that also extends to boards and possibly commissions. So if we're going to look at this, it needs to be full scope, and I think Councilor Hoy is correct in that it should be referred to the voters so they can understand the benefit. Thank you.
Councilor Kaiser?
Thank you. I agree as well with my colleagues who just spoke. I agree with Councilor Andersen's goals, trying to get more representation on the council, and I do think these being volunteer positions, they do attract a certain caliber of person, whether or not that's somebody who's doing it because they're like to abuse themselves by serving on city council, or they want to serve their community and they feel that that's a passion of theirs. But if you want to do that but you just cannot do it because you don't have support either from your family, or your job is not flexible to allow you to attend meetings in the middle of the day, which often happens. I think as a volunteer council, there are some barriers to doing your job well when you are working full-time. And I don't think that the culture of council has fully realized that, because only recently have we had people who have been working full-time and people who are not near retirement or have retired. I hope that will continue to change over the years as we get different representation on the council. But I do agree, I would be curious to put it out to voters to see. I know a number of people who support this in the public, and they want their counselors to be compensated with a stipend of somehow. I also think that if we were to consider or have voters consider this, it should be a percentage of something rather than just a flat amount. And one of the models I've seen recently has been it's a percentage of the median income of that community that you receive, as opposed to just a flat amount. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Councilor Nanki?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will also not be supporting the motion. When you look at the actual dollar figures involved, up to $2,000 a month, and then you look at the annual average income of a Salem resident being $23,000 versus $24,000, which is what this stipend would be, that doesn't even remotely get close to passing the straight face test that it's not compensation, which is prohibited by our charter, and anything should go to the voters on this. I've been opposed to that fee or stipend. When I started, we had, and I've mentioned it before, we got $49 a month to help pay for gas to come back and forth to council meetings, and the state said, no, you have to count it as income. And so then we, as we do now, have the ability to turn in an expense report if we so chose for our mileage coming back and forth to here. Everything else is really volunteer time. And if we have to pay for a hardship, you don't have to be on a committee that meets in midday. You can speak to the mayor to try to get certain committees moved to a different time of day. And our meetings are always at 6 o'clock. So if your employer's not going to let you out, 6 o'clock is reasonable for an evening meeting twice a month, extra evening meeting here and there as well. But again, there's a difference between vocation and service, and we're in a volunteer service position, and unless the voters want to look at that differently,
Yeah.
Ken, I'll be voting in opposition.
Councilor Rossi.
So to go backwards a little bit, to start with what Councilor Ninke just said, it's 6 o'clock is reasonable for someone who works 8 to 5. Not everybody does. Actually, most people probably don't. With the economy, there's been more jobs but less paying jobs, than people have to pick up multiple jobs and work all kinds of hours. So I think this would be absolutely a step towards including more people, and part of that would be, this could be their part-time job that helps them with their other part-time job or whatever, because as you mentioned, there is a lower income demographic that, you know, that this would actually help sustain their family while they're able to pursue a passion of helping their community. So I do see the benefit in representation that way, as well as you were speaking a little bit about the caliber. I think you provide people the opportunity to spend more time on these major issues of hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer funds that we set the direction for and set spending for and even collecting revenue for. Having more voices and people who are able to dedicate more time to it. I know I've heard anecdotally that this is equivalent of a full-time job in numbers of hours a week spent on this work. And so what I would say is, if people were actually the people who aren't able to come to some of these meetings that you're at different times of the day, or because of their work schedule, or because they can't afford to spend that much time away from their family or their job or whatever else, to put in 30 hours a week to do all the research. And I would like to have engaged counselors who don't just show up to the meeting and look at the thing during the meeting, and have time to prepare ahead of all of their meetings and go to the neighborhood associations and do outreach and understand what their neighbors want beyond just themselves and reading a staff report. So I think it would create also more professional representation of the citizens in this very important directional position. And so I do support the motion, and I think if we choose to go out to the voters, then I'll support that as well. But I do think that the purpose is good, and it really is something that people assume already exists, and we should really consider the fact that this is a significant body of work that needs to be handled that way. So.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you. I just want to respond to Councilor Nanke, because I think and Councilor Ausick said it really well, as someone who, as a closer, I would get home at 10:30 at night. Sometimes my shifts would start at 6:30 when a truck would come in. So a 6 p.m. meeting may be very reasonable for some. Also, facing the issues of childcare. When I first thought about running for council, I thought I needed to be independently wealthy. Finances, I thought, would be a barrier. It turns out that it wasn't. It turns out that I was able to, through support with the community, run a campaign, and I'm able to make it work with my family and my support. But I think if we look at it, instead of framing that issue of compensation or time lost, because I noticed you used the word, volunteer and service and taking that notice. I think if you look at it through the lens of what are the barriers to people serving. For some people, it is a barrier to service, as we talked about tonight, or a barrier to access a park. For some people, finances may be a barrier, whether it's through time, that they're already committed to working a job, whether it's through commitments of being able to provide care within their family. And those voices provide a different angle that we may be missing, and is quite frequently missing in these areas, because when I'm out in the community and I say, oh, well, here's this board, or apply to serve on this commission, there was a time not too long ago where people would say, oh, I can't afford to do that. Oh, I'm busy on Tuesday nights. Or, oh, I'm working. That's a special night for me. I can't do that. So I think it's important that we look at it in this lens of removing a barrier, because everyone should be able to have an opportunity to come and serve.
Okay. Lewis?
Yeah, I can't support the motion. I'm going to say two things in reference to what I've heard tonight. One, we just got through celebrating over 9,000 volunteers who donated 205,000 hours. 205,000 hours. And you put that up against the concern that we don't have representation, I submit that we do. If people want to volunteer, there are opportunities for them to volunteer. If they can't afford to do that, I don't know if we should be throwing money out there to motivate people to come and do public service. Second thing I'm going to say, and it was mentioned earlier, Section 26 of the Salem Charter says the mayor and councilors shall receive no compensation for their services. And I disagree that this is not for our services. We have the opportunity to be paid back for out-of-pocket expenses, and we are now talking about being paid for services. If we want to change the charter, then let's change it. But right now, the direction in my mind is crystal clear, and the fact that we had 205,000 hours of volunteerism, including ours, shows that this is a very, very committed community.
Councilor Nanki? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to vote no on this as well. I listened to Jeff James somewhat bemused. I was in the press box when he was talking about Lindsay and Stillings and Dewey Rand and that crowd. I've watched council after council after council for over almost 45 years, and I have seen every kind of person in this community serve on this city council for nothing or for a very small stipend. And Nanki's been doing it even longer than that. And I think I signed up as a volunteer 11 years ago. Not independently wealthy, working a full-time job, and I found this is the way I like spending my free time. Other people join the Masons, they join the Odd Fellows, they get very involved in their church, they do community service. We've got a guy who cleans out police cars I think deserves more than any one of us deserve for the work he's doing. It's actual work. And he does it as a volunteer. We've got people who put books on the shelves at the library, again, more than we do, and not being paid. We are a council manager form of government. I think you're genuinely talking about changing the form of government when you start talking about a compensated city council. Stipend is, I think, I find it somewhat cynical, but I will say I think it is compensation. I look at the compensation, and we're talking serious money, at Portland City Council. I will stack up the government of Salem against the government of Portland any day, any day. The lack of corruption here, the professionalism of our management. We're not managers. I think this is an outstanding system. It comes out of the progressive era. I think we're better than Eugene, although I'm sure there are people who'd rather live in Eugene. We hear about it fairly regularly. But I don't see that the compensation makes a difference in the quality, and it hasn't for years. We all signed up to be volunteers. If you didn't want to be, do something else. And let me give you the ones that make a lot of money. Congress, gosh, you're in the couple $100,000 a year range. They're running at what, 10, 15% of public perception? I mean, we're doing our jobs here, the part that we contribute to the city. We're running at 91%. People are satisfied with their government. Take a look at Congress. They're making lots of money. Anybody, we just saw an election that proved it, can serve in Congress. I'm not sure what people think, why they think money improves service. I served in the state legislature for $900 a month. And it was an interesting place to serve. I still would rather serve on this city council. It's more meaningful. It's more directly related to people. And all I saw were people who tried to live on $900 a month and couldn't do it. So I don't know. I just think this is the wrong way to go. And if you're going to do it, I would suggest put together a campaign, initiate it, get the citizens to sign a petition, to change their charter, at least getting rid of compensation, and then I think it'd be helpful to define what you think your jobs are. Because I get calls all the time, would you ask my counselor to come to my neighborhood group? Very commonly, that happens. So I'd really like to kind of see everybody's calendar for all this work everybody's doing. I know what mine looks like. What? I didn't hear you, Counselor.
It's not important.
Just being snarky? I know how much work I did. I know how much work I did as a city councilor, and it is a lot of work if you take it seriously, but there are complaints. I don't know. I think this is just barking up the wrong tree. I really do. And again, I've seen these councilors for over 40 years, and it has been every representation in this community has served on this councilor. There is not one type of person missing who's not served on this council when they choose to. Most of you are too young or too new to know about this, aside for you, McCoy. So I hope we vote this down, and if you want to bring it up through the ballot. With that,
Mayor?
Yep. Let you close.
I assume everybody who wants to talk on this has talked, and I just have a few comments.
It's your turn.
And then I'll be ready for the vote. First one is I want to quote one of my favorite philosophers, which is, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. So, there's no point at all in responding to some of the discussion made. I guess the last point I want to make is in response to something Councilor Nanke said. Maybe I'll have to start thinking about reimbursing get expenses for my bicycle riding down to all the council meetings.
There you go. There.
I call the question.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Aye. Okay, ayes are Ossick and Andersen, the rest are nays. Except for, who's missing over there? Okay, motion fails. Okay, what's next?
Information.
Information reports. Councilor McCoy.
I move to call up item 6B, the application for the Kuebler Gateway Shopping Center.
Second.
Second by Nanke.
This is an easy one for me. This has been highly contentious in my ward. It lies within my ward, and I know the folks there want to have their day in court. I think in this specific instance, there is actually reasons to have a hearing, because I think there's issues here that need to be vetted and could result in a change here.
Okay. Okay, we have a
yes vote.
motion second. All discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No. Who's no? Lewis is the no. Okay, motion
And
passes.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yeah.
presume you got my aye vote.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay.
You got your eye.
Anything else on the information reports? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's do the readings.
First reading. Ordinance Bill Number 2218, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 5826 Battle Creek Road Southeast, annexed to the City of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Salem Suburban Rural Fire Protection District.
Councilor McCoy, this is your motion.
I move staff recommendation.
Second by Hoy. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Okay, we'll go to second reading. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to engross the ordinance number 20-18 to provide for an exemption from the mandatory requirement of the 5-cent charge for paper bags for any and all businesses in compliance with the ordinance prior to its effective date, and to return the ordinance to staff to make the necessary changes.
And Councilor, would you like this back on a date certain like the 26th of November?
Would I like it back? Yeah, I would, Mayor
Good.
Bennett.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
just want to make sure that's part of what you're thinking is.
Of course,
Okay.
thank you.
Second by Hoy. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Lou- 2, 3.
Wait.
He's gone.
Anderson, are you an aye?
Oh, Anderson voted no, sorry, I had my mute button on.
Okay, let's do this again. Who's an aye? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion passes. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yo,
we're to 7.2B.
72B.
Okay. I would move to engross ordinance bill number 2118 to add an emergency clause as section 4 of the ordinance, so the ordinance will take effect immediately, and conduct second reading of the ordinance bill as engrossed.
Second by Kaiser.
So,
Well,
I don't know.
Kaiser just lit up when you said that.
Engrossed ordinance bill number 2118, an ordinance relating to public nuisance, amending SRC 98.140, 150, 160, 170, 190, and 200, and 98.210, and creating new provisions and declaring an emergency. Councilor Nanki?
Aye.
Councilor McCoy?
Aye.
Councilor Osick? Aye. Councilor Hoy?
Aye.
Councilor Cook?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser? Aye. Councilor Anderson?
Aye.
And Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We don't have any other public comments, so we are adjourned.